Over the past year, WallStreetBets users have made and lost over $1 billion collectively. From one user trading his way to $30 million to another user getting into generational debt, we're gonna look back at all the crazy trades I've covered over the past year. Grab some popcorn and enjoy. Strange Manager 6801 is a user who got completely wrecked trading options. For a bit of context, Strange Manager says that he is a very frugal person and rarely spends money on things that he doesn't need. He opened up a Robinhood account, but was so worried he'd lose money that he opened it solely for the Robinhood Gold 5% yearly yield. So far, this story does not sound like the story of someone from WallStreetBets. But don't worry, Strange Manager got tired of the 5% yield, and his frugality? Pfft, forget that. In fact, he completely skipped the shares part too and got right into trading options. He quickly made a few thousand in profit on his $50,000 account. He sold half his position and let the other half ride out, but the position he let ride out took him back down to break even, which really struck a nerve with him, and kinda just led him to losing $50,000 in 2 days. Definitely a big change in his once frugal mindset. Perryboo1980 said, guessing OP didn't work hard for this money. Strange Manager said, was very impulsive, learned not to F around with options. But whether he actually learned that lesson or not was unclear because we would get this post only a month later. Pray for me. He was down $4,700 on 0 DTE SPY puts, and it seemed like he was gonna lose even more money. But surprisingly, he said sold for $20K. Smiley face. He wouldn't be smiling for long though, cause 2 weeks later, he showed us the most recent screenshot of his portfolio, and with $0 in it, it seems like his prayers went unanswered. Strange Manager went from being scared of investing $50,000 into the S&P 500 to losing $117,000 in options over the course of 2 months. Strange Manager said that his biggest pitfall was trying to revenge trade his way back into the green. He decided that since he lost the money from trading, he'd have to make it back through trading to be even. He says that people who are down a lot of money should just move on and cut their losses and just get a promotion at work or something. He says he is done with options for good. RobBoost330 is a user who we've covered in a recent video, but since then, he's really been walking on a tightrope. And that's saying a lot, because last time we covered him, he went from 25K to 500K, back down to 50K, then straight back up past $1 million. In that last video, I asked you guys if you thought he would be able to keep this streak going, or if he would end up losing it all. And today, you're gonna find out the answer. The last post of his we looked at showed that his portfolio was up nearly $400,000 for the day, which is insane, but 3 days later, even with $1 million portfolio, he decided to throw everything on the line once again. It was Tuesday, June 9th, and Rob was feeling more bullish than ever. It's not every Tuesday that you feel like YOLOing $733,000 on SPY calls, but I guess this Tuesday was just one of those days. Rob spent $410K on 0 DTE SPXW calls at the $6,020 strike price and $322K on calls at the $6,000 strike price. With 70% of his portfolio on the line, a bad day in the market could turn this millionaire into Wendy's Employee of the Month. And well, by the end of the day, SPXW was trading at $6,005, which meant half of his calls were out of the money, and the other half was just barely in the money. But that didn't matter, because Rob sold his calls when SPXW spiked up around the middle of the trading day. He made a total profit of $412,000 for the day, and surprisingly, it seemed like he was about ready to take a break. He said, "It's been fun. I think I'll have to stop myself." Best of all, he already took out about $326K from Robinhood, as shown in this screenshot, so that means his portfolio is $300,000 less than it would have been had he have just left it in there, obviously. Rob proved all the haters wrong. He took 25K to nearly 1.5 mil, and now he was quitting while he was ahead. Except he didn't really quit, and only 3 days later, he woke up to an additional 343K in his portfolio, putting him at 1.77 mil. This is incredible, but little did Rob know, a bomb was about to go off in his portfolio. Rob started off the day by throwing $1.5 million into even more 0 DTE SPXW calls. The market initially moved pretty sideways, but about an hour in, things took a deadly turn. His portfolio fell by about $250,000 in just a few minutes, and it didn't look like things were gonna get better anytime soon. But Rob has seen a situation like this time and time again. In fact, instead of selling, he decided to double down on his decision, leaving only $3,000 on the sidelines. And Just like that, Rob's portfolio crashed straight back down to zero. Instead of losing it all, the market quickly rebounded and made him another $450,000 for the day. Frankie Lasagna asked Rob a pretty good question, but all Rob could say was, whatever do you mean, sir? Rob had just over $2.2 million in his portfolio, which is a long way from his initial $25K. But the story doesn't end there, even though, it probably should have. Rob kept on trading, and a couple months later, on August 17th, his portfolio definitely didn't have $2.2 million in it anymore. After that, Rob stopped posting to the subreddit, and everyone assumed that he probably made his way even closer to zero. But I can't even make this up. Rob somehow flipped the script once again. On August 27th, he made his grand return to WallStreetBets and posted a screenshot of his $1.4 million portfolio that was up $676K just for the day. Thanks to his signature 0DTE SPXW calls, he made it back out the gutter a third time. Once again, Rob went from $25K to $500K, back down to $50K, back up to $1 million, then to $2.5 million, then all the way down to $87K, then whoop, now back up to $1.4 million. Rob said, "This week has been glorious in terms of my timing and luck in the options market. So this is for everyone who thinks it's not possible to continue after losing. It just takes a few YOLO bets and some massive balls, and of course some cash to start. Stay loyal." He includes a screenshot of his chart year to date, which also shows that he now only has $39 in buying power. Rob somehow made it away relatively unscathed again, and it seemed like he was ready to cement his status as a millionaire. Until 2 days later, he lost $1 million on trusty 0DTE SPXW calls. What's even more concerning is that $124 in buying power and the fact that the portfolio value is cropped out. So to answer whether or not Rob lost it all,
I guess we'll never know.
Rob did say that if you like the video and subscribe to Yummers, your next trade will be very profitable. Exotic Flatworm 1817 is a user who hasn't had the best luck when it comes to trading options. His first post of his own portfolio came way back on September 16th of 2024, and it definitely was not a positive one. He said, "Good morning, Mullen. Down $64,000 all time with a current market value of only $179, things were not looking great at all." The Alex Knowles said, "Was your sell button broken?" But it turns out that wasn't the case, cause believe it or not, Exotic Flatworm decided to buy even more Mullen. Only 14 days later, he increased his losses by about $3,800 and said, "Mullen is a scam, and also, I am an idiot." Simple as that. Well, Exotic Flatworm didn't have a good time holding penny stocks, so he realized he needed to change his approach to investing. That being said, he started buying options instead of shares. He ditched Mullen and bought $869 worth of Palantir calls that expired in a few weeks. Not much, but baby steps. This was his first options trade, and only 17 days after holding, he was up over $2,400, which was a lot better than whatever Mullen was doing to him. 11 days later, he showed us the next options trade he was in, but this one wasn't going as well as the first. After about a month of holding AMD calls, he was down over $4,600. He wasn't too worried though. He definitely has faced bigger battles than this one, so he kept on holding, except it never moved in the direction he wanted it to. By February 5th, he was down $7,300 and said, "I gotta go back to washing dishes." His calls expired worthless, but funnily enough, AMD had a pretty solid run over the summer that he never got to see through. A couple months later, he posted another picture of his position in Mullen after they did several reverse stock splits, artificially putting his average cost at $386 million a share. Dutchmore7 said, "You invested that much money after seeing this as the official picture of their CEO?" Yes, he did. On August 19th, Exotic Flatworm was tired of constantly losing money, so he got ready to place his biggest and riskiest trade yet. Nvidia was trading at just about $175 a share, but he felt like it would make its way up to $182 a share within the next 10 days. So much so that he was willing to bet $30,000 on it. Nvidia actually made it right under his strike price after rising 4% in just 4 days. There were only 3 days left till expiration, but Exotic Flatworm wanted to bite the bullet. He was confident the stock would continue rising, but by expiration day, Nvidia was actually trading lower than it was when he initially bought the contracts. There went another $30,000. And since then, there have been no more updates from him, so hopefully he takes it easy with all the reckless trading. Bavik222 is a user who traded his way up to billions and billions of dollars. Did he lose it all like everyone else? Let's find out. Bavik's first posts were not about trading at all. They were actually about Mario Kart. But about a year later, he started documenting his trading journey on WallStreetBets. With his first major trade, he bought $3,500 worth of Robinhood calls that didn't expire for a few months. He posted screenshots of his progress a few weeks later, and safe to say, things were actually going great. Up 1,400%, his calls were worth about $53,000 combined. Bavik didn't make any posts over the next year and a half, but when he finally made his return, it seems like he suddenly became much richer than before. On June 9th, he threw $843,000 into Nebius Group, or NBIS. He got calls that had 2 months till expiration, but the stock needed to jump 14% for his contracts to be in the money, so things were definitely looking dangerous. And over the next 2 months, the stock had not risen, but actually fallen by about 1%. 2 months with essentially no difference in share price, it was starting to look like his contracts would dwindle down to zero. The company was reporting earnings in a few days, and this report could very well make or break these calls. Well, Nebius reported earnings and revealed they made billions and billions of dollars over the second quarter, which sent the stock flying. It jumps 25% the 2 days following the report, and even bigger than that, Bavik's portfolio was looking monstrous. He sold his calls for a $2 million gain and said he already entered a new position. He said that he did not build his net worth by gambling on options, but instead by investing in good companies supplemented with an allocation to calls and proper sizing. Right before taking this crazy gain, he also bought $26,000 worth of Zim calls. The stock was trading at just under $16 a share, and he needed it to jump about 5% within the next week for it to be in the money. The stock fell 2.5% the next day, and the day after that was Saturday, so Bavik had some time to sit and reflect. But Monday was a heater of a day because the stock jumped over 16%. Bavik was up 1,900% for the day and got his hands on a $157,000 gain. On September 7th, he posted a screenshot of his Robinhood calls that were down $624,000 and said he'll hold these to zero if he has to. That's the last update we have from him, so hopefully Robinhood does well over the next couple months. Leo S. Lay is a college student who used to be pretty broke, as most college students are, but found WallStreetBets, and we all know that's the road to lifelong riches. He started his journey earlier this year, back in February, with just $2,800, which isn't much, but remember, he was still only in high school at this time. He threw $2,800 into AMD leaps, and things were off to a slow and unprofitable start. From the start of February to Liberation Day, the stock was down just about 33%. But after April, he says the stock went on a generational run and he sold for what seems like a $3,000 profit. With just about $6,000 in his portfolio, he says that this is where his real journey began. According to him, his first trades were just random weeklies. He bought Tesla puts when the stock went up and switched over to calls when it went down and he thought it was oversold. This strategy surprisingly didn't send his portfolio out with flames, but he didn't think it was going to make him money long term. This is when he read about Donald Trump Jr.'s new SPAC that was being talked about in the daily thread. He quickly YOLO'd into Grab-A-Gun Digital Holdings and CLBR. The merger was very heavily hyped up, so he was up a decent amount of money, but after the merger actually happened, he kinda got rug pulled. He lost about $1,000, which didn't bankrupt him, but it did make him mad. He was trading on emotions and booted up WallStreetBets to find everyone talking about Open. He YOLO'd his whole portfolio on options, but surprisingly, he got both calls and puts. He threw $5,000 into puts, and before he even sold those, he also got $5,500 worth of calls, which may seem a bit counterproductive. But we should never question a true master at work. He quickly sold his calls for a $6,800 profit the same day. Since the stock was up so high, his puts were obviously down quite a bit, but even if those puts expired worthless, he'd still be up $1,800 on Open. But luckily, the stock came crashing back down only a day later, and he was able to lock in another $3,700 gain. He made $10.5K on Open in 2 days, which is pretty big stuff for a freshman in college. On July 23rd, he threw $8,500 into AMD calls, which was most of his portfolio, but thankfully they had a year till they expired. The stock rose 12% over the next 6 days though, and he sold for a $3,600 gain. Reflecting back on this trade, he says, "I don't even remember why I got 10K worth of AMD calls, but apparently I did. That's nice." He now had about $20,000 in his portfolio, which was very good considering he started with only 2.5K a few months ago. On August 1st, he was feeling extra risky though, so he YOLO'd half his portfolio on 0 DTE SPY calls. And somehow he once again got his hands on another great gain, making 6K in just a few hours. He was feeling so confident that he once again YOLO'd half his portfolio on even more 0 DTE SPY options later that day. Except this time, he got puts instead of calls. He threw 11.6K into 0 DTE puts and sold not too long after for a $2,100 profit. 8K in a day is not bad at all, but he was starting to realize that maybe he was getting a little bit too lucky. He was worried things would fall apart soon, so he did the responsible thing and checked out the value investing subreddit. But apparently, he felt like that subreddit was even more unhinged than where he came from. So back to WallStreetBets he went. And as soon as he returned, he saw someone make a post about the Google antitrust remedies, so he took the most reasonable course of action and YOLO'd into in-the-money calls that expired in 2 weeks. Google was on an absolute tear and rose more than 6% over the next 10 days, which is when he sold for a $13,000 gain. He felt like the stock still had more room to run, so only 2 days later, he threw $28,000 into even more calls. This time, he got calls that expired out in December, but only 12 days later, he sold for a $7,000 gain. With about $40,000 in his portfolio, it would be smart to just take that money and use it to pay for college. But was he gonna do that? On August 29th, he YOLO'd 28.5K into even more Google calls. And in only 4 days, the stock jumped an additional 9%, so he sold his calls for an $11,000 gain. This left him with $52,000 in his portfolio, but it doesn't seem like he's gonna stop trading, so hopefully things stay green. In his post, he wrote, "I just started university this year and nearly had to bag fries every summer to pay my tuition due to the fact that I am poor AF. But this game covers my entire degree. So I am genuinely thankful to this community, because without you guys, I would not have found out about options." That's a statement that doesn't get uttered very often on WallStreetBets. The Sun Also Rises 12 is a user who discovered options and immediately started going all in. Before his first post to WallStreetBets, his last post was made all the way back in 2018, so it's safe to say that this was some important business. On June 12th, he made a post titled, "Just discovered options." Usually that's a pretty dangerous sign, but his portfolio was actually up about 86% over the past 3 months. Nam Sane Man said, "Undiscover them now." But the Sun Also Rises replied with, "Why would I cast away such sacred knowledge?" Another user said, "OP about to see here soon why we don't do options for a living." Not to worry though, he replied letting us know that he already has money put aside for a nice cardboard box when this all blows up. Despite all the jokes, he was determined to make even more money in the market, which is why he YOLO'd over $60,000 on call credit spreads on SPY the very next day. This was, of course, a very risky move and, quite frankly, an unprofitable one, because about an hour after he invested, he was already down about $25,000. Down 15% in an hour, it seems like all the naysayers were right. But then, that same day, news came out regarding Israel, so the market started dropping pretty quick. His $138,000 portfolio jumped up to a new all-time high at 193K. Only 3 days later, he got ready for an even rockier trade than the last. He was still feeling pretty bearish, so he loaded up on even more 0 DTE SPY call credit spreads. About an hour into the trading day, the market was not down at all. The Sun Also Rises portfolio was down almost 20% with 114K in it. But he was not gonna back down. He doubled and tripled down as SPY rose higher and higher, and luckily, by lunchtime, things took a complete 180. Instead of losing $26,000 for the day, he scraped by with a $16,000 profit. He now had 157K in his portfolio, which is less than the 193K he had 3 days before this, so he must have had a losing trade that he didn't post about. The very next day, he wanted to push his luck even further, so he wound up YOLOing over $43,000 worth of credit spreads throughout the day. He started off feeling bearish, so he scooped up $5,600 worth of call credit spreads. He quickly sold for a $2,800 profit, and right after that, he risked another $19.2 thousand, and somehow he closed for another $17.3 thousand gain with that one. He still wasn't done though and wanted to go 3 for 3, so he risked another $7,000 and made 6.3k very quickly. Then he started feeling bullish later on in the day, so he risked another $11.5 thousand and made another $5,700 in profit. Altogether, he made just over $32,000 for the day, and he even started to withdraw a good chunk of his cash so that he wouldn't lose all of his profits. The next day, it was business as usual, and he got even more SPY call credit spreads. Just like the rest of his trading days, it started off pretty iffy, but he closed out in the green with a $35,000 profit for the day. And then, only 2 days later, he said, "I do not believe I can go back to normal life." With $261,000 in his portfolio, he said he made multiple years of his salary in 1 week. His last update was posted on June 21st, so hopefully he was able to keep his gains. YOLOing your whole portfolio on 0DTE SPY puts is never a good idea. All it takes is one optimistic tweet and you'll be heading to your nearest Wendy's to pay that month's rent. But with Imperial Trader Funding, the sponsor of today's video, you can make big trades without risking your nest egg. Imperial Trader Funding is a first-of-its-kind prop trading firm that allows you to trade stocks, options, and more with their money. You put up a small, set amount of capital, pass an evaluation, and they let you trade with up to $125,000 in real funding. This means you can trade with a lot of money, but if things go wrong, you're only out $100 instead of $100,000. It lets you put your skills to the test. And hey, if you realize you're not the greatest trader, you can stop there and you'll have saved your actual portfolio from taking a hit. They let you trade anything from 0DTE options to complex delta neutral strategies like short strangles or iron condors. You trade, they provide the capital, and you keep up to 90% of the profits depending on the account you select. On top of this, they're giving viewers of the channel a 10% discount if you sign up with the link down below in the description and use code YUMMERS, and a free 10k evaluation to the first 100 people. So be sure to check it out if you're interested. Tony G776 is a user who was financially ruined by good old Carvana. Tony G just lost it all, but he's actually been losing it all since 2021. His first post to the subreddit was a screenshot of his portfolio that has definitely seen better days. He picked up STEM options that lost him $60,000 over the past 3 months, and worst of all, these were his life savings. Don't worry though, because after losing tens of thousands of dollars on STEM, he felt like his luck would change very soon, for some strange reason. Deciding to flick the nuts of the tiger, he doubled down on his decision and picked up even more calls and shares. His shares were down 10,000 and his calls were down nearly 20,000. Worst of all, he revealed that he only made about 30k a year, which isn't the end of the world, but it definitely doesn't stretch as far when you're constantly throwing it all into a dying company. A lot of users surprisingly left pretty tame comments, and it seems like Tony G really took it to heart because he just completely stopped posting. Not a single peep until November 8th of 2024. He revealed that he may have been inactive on WallStreetBets, but he definitely was making things happen over on Robinhood. And it seems like he was full of himself now. Am I the best trader? 90% of gamblers quit before they make it big. See you at 200k. Thank you, SoFi. Sure enough, Tony G was up quite a bit of money thanks to SoFi, taking 23k to nearly 105,000, all over the course of just 3 months. The post didn't get that much traction, but Tony G was still dedicated to hitting his $200,000 goal. He was going about his life as usual and noticed a trend that would decide his next YOLO. According to him, everywhere he went, everyone was drinking these like crazy. In the morning, in the afternoon, at night. This quote-unquote superhuman energy drink he was talking about was Celsius. He not only YOLO'd his whole portfolio on Celsius shares, but he also doubled his risk by using $150,000 in margin. On top of this, he reveals that he is a 23-year-old broke, which is debatable when you have 6 figures at 23, college student who is trying to buy a house and car once he graduates. He says there are only 2 options: graduating poor or drive Lambo. At the time, the company was seeing supply chain issues that was really holding it back. He was already down 22,000 and things were looking pretty risky overall. But Tony G felt like this would all blow away with due time. And holy smokes, there is no way I can beat around the bush with this one because he invested at pretty much the most perfect time he could. He's no longer holding the stock, but he still did catch a pretty monstrous gain. After hours on February 20th, Celsius announced that they were going to buy Alani Nutrition in a $1.8 billion deal, and people went crazy. The stock rose nearly 50%, and Tony G was up $101,000 after hours. LOL, you guys called me a degen a few days ago. So obvious. I see everyone slurping these drinks everywhere. In college right now and about to have the largest party. Some users started talking trash in the comments saying that he was only able to do this because his parents gave him money, but he laid down the cold hard facts for everyone. Regardless of what anyone said, Tony G now had $325K in his Robinhood account, and he felt like Celsius had done all it needed to do. He looked for his next golden goose, but honestly didn't feel all that fond of any particular company. In fact, he felt a deep sense of hatred brewing in his bones and decided to YOLO it all on some bearish Palantir bets. $67,000 in puts and $380,000 in PLTD shares, which inversed Palantir. $200K of this was funded with margin, so it's safe to say that Tony G had a lot riding on this investment. He said that this was a bubble too obvious not to play. But whether or not the stock is overvalued is neither here nor there, cause Palantir literally doubled in price since this post. Luckily, he sold before he got burnt too badly, and only a few months later, he was already on to his next big YOLO. He YOLO'd $225K on a spread and needed Carvana to stay below $355. Tony G said that the company is a fraud and that the hype would not last forever. Flash forward to July 30th, and things were looking fine and dandy for Tony G. In only 2 more days, the spread would reach maximum profitability, and best of all, he was still in the money by more than $20. Times were good, and Tony G looked at his portfolio that was up 600% over the past year. The only part I haven't told you yet is that Carvana was reporting earnings later that day. Considering Tony G had 95% of his portfolio in puts and bearish spreads on the stock, he knew that he would lose it all if Carvana knocked it out the park. And, well, Carvana did indeed knock it out the park. The stock rose 15% after hours, which meant that his contracts were now way out of the money. Tony G said, "Tomorrow I lose everything. All of it will be gone when market opens tomorrow. I don't care. It's just money. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna be a wagey forever, and that's okay. I'm 5'4", so life sucks anyway. I don't even have a job right now, and that's okay." So instead of quitting while he was ahead with $300,000 at 23 years old, he of course flew too close to the sun and ended up losing it all. Carvana didn't go back down the next day, and his $268,000 loss was solidified. Tony G lost it all, but the Cinema God is a user who has found a way to never lose an options trade ever again. You might think that sounds too good to be true, but let's hear him out for a sec. Even though he unlocked the secret sauce now, he used to be a losing trader like the rest of WallStreetBets. In fact, from 2020 to July of 2025, he lost just about $60,000 total. The Cinema God recognized that day trading wasn't going to start paying the bills anytime soon, so he came to the conclusion that he needed to change his strategy. Moving forward, he made sure to YOLO 100% of his portfolio with every trade. Most people would call this a surefire way to homelessness, but the Cinema God saw this as the golden ticket for some reason. 1 week into it, he was somehow in the green. He was only up about $2,000, but hey, a 20% weekly gain is nothing to scoff at. The Cinema God was silent over the next few weeks, but finally made his debut to the subreddit 1 month in. Instead of losing it all, he was actually up 122%. With almost $20,000 in his portfolio. He said he went on a 19-day win streak trading 0DTE QQQ options, but I'm not exactly sure if that's true given the sudden monster of a drop he had a few days prior. Anyway, he said he looks for a modest 5% return a day and expects to 3x his portfolio over the next few weeks. Of course, a lot of users on the subreddit would clown him for being so confident, and of course he was still down $46,000 all time, but the Cinema God was sure this strategy would make him a king's ransom. Except he went completely silent over the next month, and it seemed like he lost it all just like everyone said he would, until he came back to prove all the bootlickers and shoe shiners wrong. His 19-day win streak turned into a 40-day win streak. $19,000 grew to $70,000, and the Cinema God simply puts it at, "I was right, you guys were wrong. Cha-ching!" Even though this was very true, everyone was still hating on him, pointing out that he was only up 6.5% all time. A couple weeks later, and all he gave us updates on was his cat. But then, a day later, we got a very surprising comment on his last post. He said his portfolio was now worth 6 figures, and sure enough, he had the proof to back it up. He also said something about his massive success starting after he subscribed to Yummers or something like that. It also seems like he was staying true to the consistent 100% daily YOLO. That was his latest update, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see if he can keep it up. Intelligent Cap 1061 is a user who got completely wrecked by Apple. He also seems to not exactly know what he's doing. In the middle of July, he dropped tens of thousands of dollars on Apple calls. He was up slightly, but posted to Reddit saying, "Will this make me $1 million? I have no doubt in my mind Apple is never gonna reach $220 again." So for some reason, he has no doubt that Apple will never hit $220 again, but he's also all in on calls. 11 days later, he posted a picture of some new contracts he scooped up. The only problem was that they were down 15% and expired in a few days. Some users told him that he would be okay, but others said that this was a mistake bigger than the irreparable havoc doggone Sleepy Joe caused to our economy. Despite all the optimistic words, Apple only rose 17 cents the next day, which of course would only make him lose even more money. By the end of the day, he was down over $7,000. He says that he's relatively new to options and realizes that he made a foolish mistake. And only 4 days later, he came back to WallStreetBets with very sad news. He was now down $60,000 all time and was set on quitting options for good. His account that was once worth over $200,000 was now only worth $79K. According to him, he got addicted, lost all motivation, and stopped applying himself at work. He feels like a total failure and wants to seek counseling because he truly believed that he could get good at trading at some point. His friends and family think that he's well off, but he admits that he will likely need to sell a lot of his belongings. He even put on weight and just lost all discipline to do anything, it seems like. He really does emphasize the dangers of recklessly trading options. That's why he was done with options and said he was gonna throw everything into Apple shares. But a lot of users jokingly said that he'd be back at it again tomorrow. And sure enough, only a week later, he posted this screenshot. I don't think Apple rose 53% in 3 days, so it seems like he's back trading options. Funnily enough, Apple did have a solid month, so Intelligent Cap would have been up a pretty decent amount if he just waited a bit to sell his original Apple calls. How is a user we've talked about before, but just recently, he got hit with a loss that might put him out of business. Before this loss, things were going okay though. On June 11th, he dropped $40,000 on Rocket Lab calls and got ready to make a whole lot of money. Except Rocket Lab was not doing so hot and lost him $6,700 within just 3 days. And it didn't seem like he was picking any other real winners either. But luckily, things picked up later that week and he sold his Tesla and Rocket Lab calls for a $7,300 profit. 5 days later, he was ready to be a bear and threw $28,000 on 0 DTE Tesla puts. Tesla did fall in price that day, but only by less than 1%. Howe posted a screenshot of his unrealized $14,000 loss and asked, "Am I doing this right?" 3 weeks after that, he posted a screenshot of his TMC calls that were up $5,400 at the time. Not sure if he's still holding, but the stock has fallen 38% since this post. Even though it's trading at $4.72, he says he sees $28 on the horizon. For some reason, he went on an absolute trading rampage on July 30th and made just over $30,000 in realized gains for the day. On July 31st, he YOLO'd about $74K into 1 DTE Meta puts. Meta had a heater of a day on the 31st, but actually fell quite a bit the following day. He sold it all for a $51,000 profit. Someone commented, "These people are rich. IDK how someone can throw that much money and not think about what happens if you lose." And Howe said, "Rich? Far from it, buddy." Only a day later, he was ready for his next 6-figure YOLO. Nvidia was trading at about $174 a share, and Howe felt like that was an absolute bargain of a price. That being said, he threw $111,000 into calls that expired in just under a month. It was Friday, so the market closed, and Howe rested up over the weekend. But when he came back to Robinhood on Monday, things were definitely shaken. Nvidia jumped over 3.5% for the day. In the middle of the trading day, he was already up $19,000, so he posted to WallStreetBets asking people if he should sell or keep on holding. He did sell, but he still wanted more. Hao's journey has been pretty smooth sailing so far, but this is where things start to get rocky. He was getting sick and tired of Jensen Huang and felt like, you know what, maybe Lisa Su knows what to do. That being said, he YOLO'd his whole entire portfolio into at-the-money AMD calls. And to say this day was volatile would be an understatement. An hour and a half into the day, he was down 20K. But an hour later was back in the green. But 30 minutes after that was down 20K again. But it's okay, because once again, 30 minutes later, he was back in the green. But an hour later, he was back in the red, and the market closed with him down $15,500 for the day. Cherry on top, Nvidia was going crazier than ever and hit a new all-time high. So if he would have just held his original calls, he would have been in a much better, more profitable situation. But luckily, AMD started heating up that night and was up 3% at market open. Hao quickly sold his calls and locked in a $42,000 profit, bringing his portfolio to 166K. Even though he made a solid profit with AMD, he felt like he missed out with Nvidia. So he, like always, YOLO'd his whole entire portfolio on at-the-money Nvidia calls. With $170,000 on the line, Hao was hoping that the stock would continue the rally it was on. And it did, but instead of seeing it through, Hao sold for an $11,500 loss just 3 hours into the trading day. Even though this was a pretty big loss, it was nothing compared to what was about to hit him the next day. On August 8th, Hao was feeling very bullish on Tesla. The stock was trading very sideways over the past 2 months, and he felt like it was time for the stock to go back down. He once again full ported into options, except this time, he was gonna be extra risky. Instead of getting contracts that expired a few weeks out, he got 0 DTE puts. Very, very brave considering he only had a few $100s sitting on the sidelines. Well, it turns out Hao can pull a fast one on Jensen Huang. He can bamboozle Lisa Su, but one man he can never fool is Elon Musk. And his trading streak took a massive hit. His portfolio was basically cut in half and he was down almost $74,000 for the day, all thanks to Elon. Now, what does someone who has just had their net worth sliced in half do? Well, of course, within minutes, they once again YOLO everything into even more options. Right after losing 74K, just a few minutes later, he threw everything into in-the-money Nvidia calls that expired on the 29th, which is basically the same dang position he's been all wishy-washy on over the past week. And no joke, as soon as he bought, that's when Nvidia stopped its run. He didn't tell us when he sold, but it seems like he either broke even or sold for a small loss. A week later, he decided that his next YOLO was Webull. The company was reporting their earnings a week after that, so Hao loaded up on out-of-the-money calls. Unfortunately though, the stock started falling as soon as he bought it. His first day of holding, he was down over 7%. The following day, the stock fell another 6.5% and his contracts were down another 40. The real kicker was that he averaged down that morning and added another 30K to the pot. He was down about 17K total and needed the stock to jump 14% to simply break even. Commercial Ease used to be a very safe and reasonable investor, but recently started losing lots of money by YOLOing it all. Before Commercial Ease got super reckless, he says that, yeah, he would partake in the occasional meme stock and trend here and there, but only with a small fraction of his portfolio. Going back to August of 2024, Commercial Ease had just about 134K in his Fidelity portfolio. Something changed in him over the next few months, and he was no longer satisfied with the safe, long-term growth that his portfolio was giving him. He got rid of all of his safe positions and started full porting into random hyped up stocks. Some of his picks included Archer, Rocket Labs, D-Wave, QUBT, and some others. If you're not really into these hyped up stocks, you may not know it, but all these had pretty strong rallies closing out 2024. Commercial Ease's portfolio went from 134K in August to 616K in December. He nearly 5x'd his money, and it was Christmas time. What else can you ask for? Well, Commercial Ease apparently can ask for a whole lot because he still wasn't satisfied with this. He wanted to keep pushing his luck and looked for the next hidden gem of a stock. Since stocks have to have a certain market cap to be mentioned on WallStreetBets, he couldn't name them directly, but his pick was, according to him, a battery and Bitcoin stock. Once again, not exactly sure which one. He bought this stock before it was popular, but felt like it would catch on soon enough. And somehow, Commercial Ease was right yet again. He sold his shares and locked in another $110,000 gain. He was about $250,000 away from 7 figures, so he was motivated to keep going. WallStreetBets had done all it could do. He needed to move on to the big league, which was, the penny stock subreddit. Commercial Ease started getting a lot of attention on the subreddit after posting his earlier gains with stocks like Archer. This is where the story takes a dangerous turn. Someone reached out to him and told him about a stock that, for some reason, always seemed to moon in December. Commercial Ease did his own expert due diligence and actually agreed that the stock would be a winner. So much so that he even became a mod for the stock subreddit. Once again, due to WallStreetBets market cap restrictions, he can't specifically name what stock it was, but he says it was an AI company that dealt with train safety. Commercial Ease YOLO'd everything into shares, but instead of quickly making money like he did with his other picks, he actually started losing tens of thousands of dollars on a weekly and even sometimes daily basis. Since he was so deep in his research and was surrounded by believers online, he didn't really think this was that big of a deal and felt like the stock would start rocketing anytime soon. Well, there ain't no way to sugarcoat it. The stock is down 82% year to date, and in the 3 months that he held the stock, his portfolio went from $726,000 to just $135K. He says he's just a normal person and that this loss was really devastating. For privacy reasons, he had to make his Reddit profile private, which is why I wasn't able to include very many screenshots, but he says that he learned his lesson and never full ports into a single stock anymore. It might sound like the story ends there, but the one screenshot that we do have from him shows that, yes, he did go from 726 to 135K in a few months, but he also went from 135K to 430K in about the same time. Not sure if this is possible without full porting on speculative stocks. RobBoost330 is a user who decided that he was going to YOLO his portfolio every day and became so attached that he couldn't stop. Disregarding Rob's first ever post on the Rise of Kingdom subreddit, he made his first post to WallStreetBets on May 14th. With SPY and QQQ, his portfolio grew 178% in the past week alone. But don't get too excited just yet, because he was still down over 7K all time. For some reason, Helipad668 thought that this post was some sort of CIA government conspiracy and said, "If any of you believe these gain posts here, you are a low IQ idiot." Rob got back saying, "This ain't fake, boy." His $50,000 portfolio was now worth $25,000 a day later. Despite Rob's 50% fall in a day, Helipad668 still for some reason couldn't believe someone could make lucky or unlucky trades. Over the next few days, he luckily worked his way back up to $56,000. After finally breaking even on Robinhood, some would say that taking a break from trading would be wise. Rob woke up that morning and got ready for his day at work like usual. Work was starting soon, but Rob wasn't really worried about that just yet. He instead was getting ready to YOLO his entire portfolio on 0 DTE QQQ calls. He threw $48,000 flat into calls at the $520 strike price. The stock opened in the red at about $515 a share, and of course, if things didn't take off soon, Rob's money would be gone forever. With some sort of financial wizard spell, QQQ hit his strike price in just about half an hour. His $56,000 portfolio jumped to $98,000. If you think a 75% gain is enough for him, then you must be out of your mind. Rob was fully dedicated to striking it rich. Kinda like Elon, I love you. He says he's currently using his paychecks to YOLO his way back into the green after going negative on margin and taking a break. He made it clear that 1 million was the number that he was going for. He also let us in on his secret trading strategy. You might think that these are all jokes, but Rob is dead serious. He took a 4-day break from posting, but not from trading, and broke into 6 figures. It was May 23rd, and Rob immediately threw $28,000 into 0 DTE QQQ calls, and was initially in the green by a few thousand, but by lunchtime, he was down almost 20K. Rob averaged down not 1, not 2, but 3 times, tying up a total of $105,000. He only had $500 in buying power left, so if these trades didn't pan out the way he wanted them to, he'd be flipping burgers forever. Luckily though, QQQ's dip was short-lived, and he sold for a $70,000 gain. Rob went from 25 to 190K And we've seen a situation like this 1,000 times. Rob was not gonna give up just yet. Rob says that instead of setting stop losses, he just, watches the stock and prays. The weekend came along and gave Rob some time to reflect on his actions. And after reflecting long and hard, he was back to business. That morning, he YOLO'd into, once again, QQQ calls and SharpLink gaming stock as it started rocketing. SharpLink actually 5x'd that day, and QQQ was also very strong. He posted another win for Monday market. The only issue was that it wasn't Monday. Apparently, Rob was partying a little too hard over the weekend and just skipped over Monday. Anyway, days of the week didn't really matter all that much because he may not have known it yet, but the following day would be one that would go down in history books. He threw everything into QQQ and Nvidia calls that expired 0 and 2 days later, respectively. Well, the first half of Rob's day was very volatile. No joke, every half an hour he went from being up 20,000 to down 20,000. Rob could have sold to be about break even for the day, but Rob is not a chicken. But sometimes it seems like chickens are the real winners because he quickly started losing tens of thousands of dollars a minute. But then, in the blink of an eye, he was back in the green by 37K. Phew! That $267 he had on the sidelines was definitely not gonna hold him over. Rob now had almost $300,000 in his portfolio. He could easily just invest in an index fund and make some pretty solid passive income that way. But Rob was not dumb. He wanted to YOLO his whole portfolio every day because, quote, 15% of small money is small gains, while 15% of everything is a great day if green. He isn't rich, but also isn't worried about losing his money because he plans on staying lucky. That last sentence may foreshadow some bad, catastrophic events, just saying. Over the course of the next week, he grew his portfolio to nearly $550,000, 55% of the way to his big goal. He threw everything into more 0 DTE QQQ calls, and hey, if this play doubled his money, he would make it past $1 million. But lunchtime rolled around and QQQ dropped nearly 1.5% in just over an hour. Rob was left with this. He may have been down 90%, but he figured that he was just gonna let his calls run on autopilot. Somewhat luckily, QQQ rebounded a decent amount by the end of the day, but not enough to take him back into the green. His $497,000 loss got cut down to $300,000, so that means he should still have about $250K left in his portfolio. And that's all the updates we have up until June 3rd, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see how the rest of his story plays out. I thought the story was over, but on June 6th, Rob came back to the subreddit with this screenshot. During his 3-day hiatus, Rob was making profitable trades and kept them all to himself. But now, he flew past his $1 million goal and couldn't stop himself from spilling the beans. Rob went from 25K to 500K, back down to 250K, then straight back up past $1 million. Do you guys think he's gonna keep his $1 million, or do you think he's gonna end up losing it all, similar to another person we've talked about before? This just goes to show that you gotta drop a like and subscribe for Rob's level of luck on your next trade. Seriously though. MoistAd9060 also went on a pretty lucky options trading spree, but may not have had enough luck to keep it. MoistAd originally started with 15K, but unfortunately, the early part of his journey didn't really get posted to Reddit. Which is actually okay, cause we're jumping straight to the action. It was April and MoistAd's $15,000 portfolio was now worth a whopping $82,000. He 5x'd his money and was feeling on top of the world. Every single day, he bought $10,000 worth of 0 DTE SPY puts, and he stuck to it. Spending $300,000 a month on 0 DTE SPY calls is a surefire way to early retirement, and MoistAd was making his way there pretty quickly actually. On April 10th, his portfolio grew to just under 150K. He was up 50% in a day, but wasn't ready to sell his contracts just yet. He held on to all of these overnight and hoped for the best. Particular Base 3390 said, "Road to bankruptcy. Hope you aren't too attached to your kidneys." And Soulful Academics pointed out that he needed to chill out. MoistAd replied with, "Yeah, I realized I was a bit exposed when I took a 122K loss yesterday. Got saved today. Starting Monday, I'll chill." Good thing today was Thursday though. He still had another day of not chilling tomorrow. I-Chan San seemingly unironically says, "Where can I start?" Anyway, MoistAd went to sleep and got ready for his last day of wild trading. He woke up in the red, which is never pleasant, but was only down 2.5%, so it wasn't the end of the world. He opened some new 0DTE Tesla puts and 0DTE QQQ puts and closed out his TQQQ calls. He was now full bear mode. He even made the prediction that QQQ would drop 2% that day. Well, by lunchtime, the market was still alive and well, and Moist Ad's portfolio was iffy at best, down 22K for the day with only 12,000 in buying power left. He was hoping for a reversal any second now. A few more hours went by and he was down another 16,000. QQQ finished the day up almost 2%, which is basically the opposite of what he predicted, and his whole portfolio was down $48,000. A lot of users talk trash, but Moist Ad told them to calm down. He's learning as he goes, and if he does say so himself, his year-to-date return is pretty darn good. Monday rolled along, which meant that it was time for him to chill out on the ridiculous trades. Did he chill out? Let's find out. As of April 15th, he was down 153K over the past week. To top it all off, he wasn't going to cut any of his losses. He held on to all of these contracts through the night. Moist Ad may have cut his portfolio by about 2/3 from the peak, but he was still pretty motivated to reach his $1 million goal. In fact, he said that this would only delay the process by about 2 to 3 days. Except after that, Moist Ad stopped giving us updates. No more posts were made to WallStreetBets until he suddenly came back 50 days later with some pretty abysmal news. Moist Ad's portfolio went from 15 to 353K, then straight back down to 16K in 2 weeks. Moist Ad said, "Never thought I'd be making this post, but here we are. Within 2 weeks, I went from $300,000 to PDT violated, margin called, and spiritually humbled. I'm not gonna lie, I was considering launching a hedge fund. Called my dad, called my rich uncle. They were shocked, surprisingly supportive while I was winning, and started to discuss hedge fund possibilities. Turns out I wasn't a quant. I'm a changed man, but also a scared one, but it's okay. I started my true bull journey yesterday. Give me a month or two once I clear this PDT Scarlet letter, and I'll be back. Or not." This post was made on June 4th, so we'll see if Moist Ad ever gets his revenge and if his hedge fund comes to fruition. If You Say So is someone who lost a pretty big amount of money and made the realization that the only reasonable course of action was to revenge trade to make it all back. Maybe not so successfully though. On April 22nd, If You Say So was looking for his next golden goose trade that was gonna get him out the $40,000 hole he was in. A couple hours into the trading day, he scooped up $70,000 worth of 0DTE SPY puts. Pretty quickly, his puts went up about 5K, which was nice, but still a far cry from the 40,000 he wanted. He put his phone down and went to get some breakfast. Little did he know, this was a detrimental mistake. In just a few minutes, SPY jumped from $524 to $527. He put the Nvidia bytes down and opened his phone to realize that his $75,000 position was now only worth 20K. Instead of profiting $40,000, he lost 48. He said, "What in the actual F? I belong." The best part of it all was that he sold at literally the worst time to sell at throughout the whole day. F. The contract is up 1.6 now. I hate you guys. Instead of selling for 20K, he could have sold for nearly 90,000 if he held just an hour longer. Year to date, he's down 150K, and it doesn't exactly look like the chart is moving in the right direction either. Apple Snapple Tart is someone who used to frequent the Pokey Investing subreddit, but switched over to WallStreetBets and blew everyone out the water. Apple Snapple Tart started his trading journey with a measly $437, but do not count him out. He was willing to make the most degenerate trades possible to grow his account. On April 30th, Microsoft was trading at $395. They were reporting earnings after hours, so he maxed out on 2 different out-of-the-money calls, with one of their strike prices being out of the money by about 10%. It was very likely his account would go straight to zero tomorrow morning, but Microsoft completely knocked it out the park. With the stock flying 11% overnight, Apple Snapple Tart's portfolio went from $437 to $7,800. This was an absolute lotto ticket play, but for some reason he felt like YOLOing everything he just gained into yet another crazy options play. On the same day, he threw $7,500, which was basically everything, into calls on HIMs that expired in 2 weeks. Except this time, the stock price had to double for him to even be in the money. If HIMs didn't double in price over the next 2 weeks, all of these sweet gains would be turned to dust. Regardless, the stock was trading at $36 on May 1st, then $41 on May 2nd, then $42 on May 5th, then boom, $50 on May 6th, and $52 on May 7th. 6 days had passed, and the stock was somehow up 44% already. That was great, but it still needed to rise another $18 to be in the money. Except Apple Snapple Tart wasn't going to wait around any longer and sold for nearly $22,000, 3xing his money. So far, this user went from $437 to $22K, and for some reason, he still wasn't satisfied. He quickly threw everything into a mix of SMCI calls with wildly different strike prices, some of them once again needing to double to be in the money, and AMD calls that, like all of his other plays, were also insanely at the money. Anyway, it was the middle of May, and Apple Snapple Tart was ready to reveal his progress. Thanks to SMCI and AMD, his portfolio was no longer worth $22K. It was now worth $121,000. He was up 10,800% over the past month, so by this point, you would expect him to be done trading for good. But he wasn't. He decided to hold on to both of these positions. Both of these companies have stayed completely flat since he posted, but he never updated us with whether or not he sold. If he didn't, it could very well likely be back down to zero, which starts to look a whole lot more likely when looking at his all-time chart. Dr. Dankelberg is a user who was investing money for his dad and almost lost it all. Dr. Dankelberg hasn't posted very much to WallStreetBets, but the post that he does have is quite insane. Dr. Dankelberg says that he made a couple $100s trading options every now and then. Not all that interesting, but apparently his trades caught the attention of his dad, and Dr. Dankelberg Sr. wanted in on that action. His dad gave him $10,000 and let him put it to work, since he thought his son was some sort of stock market genius. The only problem was that he quickly lost half of the money that his dad gave him. Dr. Dankelberg felt like the only way he could get himself out this hole was by repeating his actions. On May 14th, he YOLO'd everything into out-of-the-money United Health puts that expired in 2 weeks. The stock was already down 47% over the past month, so Dr. Dankelberg assumed the fall would continue, because if not, his dad was not gonna see that money ever again. Miraculously though, the following day was another catastrophic day for the stock. It fell over 11% for the day, and his dad's $5,000 balance quickly grew past $30,000. Dr. Dankelberg waited a bit past the peak, but still walked away with a $26,000 gain for the day. Shaq Swaw made enough money to buy a house in a day due to unforeseen circumstances. So far, Shaq's only has 2 posts on the subreddit, but he made sure not to waste any time. It was June 2nd, and CoreWeave had multiplied in money over the past few months. Some people think the stock's rally is a bit undeserved, but that didn't matter because it didn't look like it was going to stop pumping anytime soon. That being said, Shax threw $9,200 into calls that expired a few days later. He didn't have to wait very long, and here's, according to him, the result of the gambler's skill combined with luck. He was up nearly $59,000 that day thanks to the stock's 8% rise. These calls still had 2 days left till they expired, but Shax, unlike a lot of other users on WallStreetBets, didn't want to push his luck. He sold and locked in a $60,000 profit. And thank goodness he did, because the very next day, CoreWeave fell almost 20%, which would have put him down by more than $45,000. These CoreWeave calls really blessed him up, but Shax had another position in his portfolio that was ready to catapult even harder. He woke up on June 5th not yet knowing that it was a big day. Elon Musk and Donald Trump were no longer on great terms, and they were making it public. This is great news for anyone holding Tesla puts, and Shax just so happened to be that guy. Elon Musk did the unthinkable. He talked smack about the big, beautiful bill. Trump was very disappointed and said, "Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore." Tesla was down 9% by the middle of the day, but things were just getting started. Elon Musk said, "Without me, Trump would have lost the election. Such ingratitude." Trump fired back with, "Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted, and he just went crazy." The final nail in the coffin that sent the stock even lower was when Trump said that the easiest way to save billions and billions would be by terminating Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. By the end of the day, Tesla was down over 14%, and Tesla bulls had nothing left to eat. Tesla bears, though, like Shaq's, were blessed with $250,000. Trump ended things off with, "He hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible." Shaq's wasn't the only one who was in on Tesla, though. Useful Wishbond 6695 took $140 to 9.8K in a day. Casper took $114 to 13.6K. This fella took 7 to 32K, and also had a 12.5 gain the day before that. And Blackline Strategies, well, Blackline Strategies is a bull that wants to know what's going on with his calls. Rough Resource 2900 came to WallStreetBets with only enough money for a PS4, but ended up doing the impossible. It was May 2nd, and Rough Resource had a Webull account with only $300 in it. Despite his low balance, Rough Resource had hopes and dreams, and the way to success was Google. At least that's what he thought. He threw everything he had into Google puts that expired a week later. The stock was trading at $166, and it needed to fall 10% fast, or else his puts would expire worthless. Eventually, there was only 1 day left till his puts expired, and the stock was still $15 away from his strike price, so basically, his puts were worthless. But suddenly, on the day of expiration, Apple came out with news that was not very pleasant for Google. The stock fell 9% in just under 2 hours, and Rough Resource sold his puts for a 3,200% gain for the day. Going from $250 to $6,300 in a week is a jackpot and a half, but Rough Resource wanted to push his luck even further. He took a break for the week, but immediately sprung back into action on May 15th. Google was pretty volatile, and he wanted to stay loyal to the stock, except this time he was done being a bear. He threw everything into Google calls, besides the $210 he had on the sidelines, and hoped for the best. 24 hours later, he opened up Webull to see he was up 550% for the day. With just under $32,000 in his account, most people would think that it's time to walk away, which he was actually gonna do, but not before one last YOLO. The same day he sold his last calls, he bought even more, but this time at the $175 strike price. Google was $3 away from his strike price, so pretty much anything could happen within that week that these calls had till expiration. Luckily, the stock hit his strike price and still had 2 days left till expiration, and he ended up selling for a $70,000 gain for the day. With nearly 83K, he was finally ready to call it quits. Kinda. He decided that he was gonna cash most of it out and leave 25K to trade with. He was also going to pay off his debt, double check that he was subscribed to Yummers, and buy stock instead of options. How is a self-proclaimed fool porter who's ready to live and die by the YOLO. He made his first post on April 16th with the title, "What do I do to minimize my loss?" We can't see the screenshot he added since the post got deleted, but usually questions like that are not good signs. Anyway, he followed up with another post showing his $700 unrealized loss on his Tesla call. These are baby numbers though, so let's flash forward to May 9th. Howe had $2,300 in his Robinhood portfolio, and he was still eyeing Tesla. The stock had been picking up momentum over the past few days, so he figured he may as well bet the whole farm on out-of-the-money 0 DTE calls. Elon was feeling good that day, so the stock went up 5%. Howe's portfolio blossomed 308% for the day, and he now had $9,300 ready to go. Kylo Zen ATX said, "I wish I knew what any of this was." And Howe replied with, "Don't worry. I just learned it like last week after hours of video on option trade Dinga," and apparently he's dead serious. 3 days later, he was up 35% for the day thanks to SPY. With only $29 on the sidelines, he desperately wanted to know if he should sell or continue holding. Over the next 2 days, he went on a trading rampage and broke past 30K, but by the end of it, he was back down to 14K, with most of his money in United Health puts. He also took a pretty ginormous loss on SPY. Everything that has happened up until this point is pretty crazy considering he started with just 2K, but things are about to get life-changingly crazy. He held onto his United Health puts, and the very next day, the company was hit with an investigation into Medicare fraud by the Department of Justice. Pretty bad times for the company, but splendacious for Howe. He opened up Robinhood that morning, and as the trading bell rang, his account rocketed from 14 to 125K, and best of all, he actually sold and locked in profit. And thank goodness he was going to use this money to continue making smart investments. 1 day later, he YOLO'd up on 200 SPXW contracts, but never gave us an update on that. On May 22nd, he continued his wild trading spree. He made a pretty quick $1,400 gain on Gap, but also threw about $10,000 into 1 DTE SPY puts that initially weren't going so well. Pretty quickly, $2,500 was chopped off his portfolio. Things didn't get any better either. The market rallied higher and higher, and by the end of the day, SPY was just over $10 away from his strike price. A lot of users started doubting him. These are already worthless, lol. Good luck with your Wendy's application. Thanks for donating your money to the cause. By the end of the day, these calls were down 80%. Then, all of a sudden, Trump recommended 50% tariffs on European goods, which didn't sit well with investors. At open, SPY fell about 2% from its peak at close yesterday, and Howe scrambled to sell his puts. And just like that, he got his hands on another $14,000 in profit. Howe went from up 3K to down 8K to up 14K, and haters were fuming. A few days later, Howe was yet again feeling like an eager bear. He threw $13,000 into way out of the money United Health puts that expired 3 days later. A few hours into the day, his puts were already down $4,500, and he was starting to wonder if he made a mistake. Some people clowned him, saying things like, "Buying puts on a company that's already lost half its market cap. Dead emoji. Wait, never mind. Yep, right sub." Howe didn't give a hoot though, cause what they didn't know was that he was also holding 0 DTE SPY calls that were rocketing. SPY flew 2% that day, and Howe day traded these calls for a $16.8 thousand gain. The following day, he lost a total of $4,700 on a mix of 2 DTE SPY and Nvidia calls. He posted a $3,600 gain with his SPY puts 2 days after that, and his final post was made on May 30th, showing off a modest $1,100 gain. Legitimate Space 8847 has had his fair share of ups and downs over the past 3 years on the subreddit. His first relevant post on WallStreetBets was made over 3 years ago. Legitimate Space installed a Robinhood update, and when he opened up the app later that day, he was greeted with some unpleasant news. With an account deficit of $230,000, things were not looking good. He got rid of the deficit, which is good, but came back shortly after to share another not so pleasant screenshot. Down just under $21,000 all time, Legitimate Space needed to reevaluate his strategy if he was gonna ever leave Wendy's. But then, he went silent for a whole 2 years. Just because he wasn't posting on the subreddit didn't mean he wasn't trading though. Over this time period, he lost even more tens of thousands of dollars. There was a moment of sunshine though, and he made sure to make it public. He shared his $21,000 gain for the day thanks to AST Space Mobile. He followed up last summer with even more good news. His portfolio was up 422% over the past 3 months and was now worth $86,000. At the end of 2024, he shared another gain, this time $9,700 with SPY puts. But this is where his luck starts to run out again. Back in January, he got himself into another account deficit. This time it was $588K instead of a measly $230K. At the end of February, Legitimate Space was feeling very bullish on Tesla. He threw $70,000 into Tesla shares and calls. Things were off to a rocky start though. His shares were down $10,000 and his calls were down $1,800. His options may have been expiring that day, but so what? He could just buy more, and his shares, those were keepers. But 10 days later, things were still looking pretty grim. He was down at least another $14,000 since last time, and said, "I want to go home." A now deleted user asked, "You're still holding?" And Legitimate Space responded with, "Till my last breath." Then he went on another couple month-long hiatus. Finally, he returned on May 28th with, "You all told me to sell, and guess what I did?" He really did hold through thick and thin, and his shares were now up $6,600 instead of being down $20,000. Y'all have taught me a lot, but one thing I refuse to do is follow the advice that people give here. Ironically though, this post was made only a week before Elon and Trump duked it out. Finally, on June 4th, he said, "I am about to puke." Spellbreaker has been posting on WallStreetBets for a few months now, but his craziest trade of all time didn't happen until this past month. With United Health being a pretty hot topic for this video, Spellbreaker was yet another person who felt extremely bearish on the company, except he undoubtedly outdid everyone else. On May 12th, he spent $720 on 4 DTE puts that were 8% out of the money. By now, we all know United Health crashed, but just take a look at the point he bought these puts. Unbelievable timing. The next day, his $720 puts 31x'd and he sold for a nearly $22,000 profit. After this, Spellbreaker took a break, but not for long. After only a day of waiting, he got back into the game and took another look at United Health. Despite the stock's 19% drop in 2 days, he still felt like it was doomed to keep falling. 2 hours into the trading day, he scooped up 80 contracts for a grand total of $5,600. The stock needed to fall 6% within the next 2 days, or else his contracts would of course expire worthless. But once again, he somehow picked the perfect time to buy and woke up to another 30x gain the next morning. His puts that were worth $5,600 the day before were now worth $160,000. I mean, just going back and looking at the chart, timing doesn't get much better than this. 8 days after that, he turned $2,400 into $17,000 with 1 DTE Google puts with, once again, seemingly perfect timing. Bondas32 is someone who hasn't had very much luck throughout his trading journey. He showed us a screenshot of his Webull portfolio, which has a pretty big amount of money in it, most of it in cash. But Bondas was a failing trader, which is why he asked everyone, is it possible to make 1 to 2% a day with my account? It's down like 800k, but this is what's left. Bondas' $1 million portfolio was sliced down to 200k, and he was still wondering if it was possible to 12x his money in a year. People told him things like, I don't know, maybe stop doing options and random gambling? He said, yes, just stopped today. Championship Sum 6184 is a user who almost lost it all trading options. On March 5th, he was looking at his Tesla put gains and decided that he should roll some of it over into a bullish bet. SPY had started taking a dip, and he figured that it was due for a green day. That being said, he threw over $10,000 into 0 DTE SPY calls that were just about at the money. Don gave a semi-worrying speech the night before, and things were off to a rocky start. Halfway through the trading day, Championship Sum felt like he may have made the wrong move, and almost panic sold his calls. He stayed strong though, and luckily for him, SPY rallied more than 2% over the next few hours, putting his calls up $40,000 for the day. 40k in a day is real nice. But it wasn't enough to keep him satisfied for long, cause the very next day, he decided that he was gonna buy even more 0 DTE SPY options. Except this time, he was done being a bull. He bought about 20k worth of 0 DTE SPY puts and 43k worth of puts that expired a week later. With luck once again on his side, he pretty quickly rose to a $70,000 gain. He closed out his 0 DTE puts, but let the 72k worth of weeklies ride out. The jobs report was just about to come out, and he even acknowledged that these gains could be wiped out if the government hit us with good news that day. Well, SPY rose about 0.5% the next day, and he sold his puts. SPY actually fell over 4% by the time his puts expired, and he would have made another 100k if he held, but oh well. On Friday, March 21st, he wanted to have his most degenerate day yet. SPY immediately dropped at open, so Championship Sum loaded up on out-of-the-money 0 DTE calls. Well, the market was trading pretty sideways, and he cut his losses at 20% before it got real ugly. Instead of walking away and calling it a day, he took all the cash he had left in his account and bought 1,000 calls that were just barely out of the money. That's not even the worst part though. The real zinger was that there were only 20 minutes left until the market closed. Forget 0 DTE. This was 20 MTE. Surely Theta was gonna eat all of his money and he would be left with nothing. He somehow made it out alive though, because the market immediately started rocketing after he bought these calls. In 15 minutes, his calls went from a value of 16k all the way up to $190,000. He went to lock in his 12x gain, except he couldn't. Questrade decided to risk review him, and he could not sell for 30 seconds. In these 30 seconds, his calls no joke fell by $3,000 a second. Finally, the weight was up and he locked in a $103,000 gain. He could finally take a deep breath. He says before he made this trade, he thought he was gonna have to start working at the trusty old Wendy's. These calls literally saved him. He even says that he's gonna adopt a boomer lifestyle and invest his gains into more stable ETFs instead of trying his luck again next week. He admitted that this trade was just hopium and dumb luck hitting at the perfect moment. He hasn't posted since that day, so hopefully he really did take a safer route to growing his money. Okay, this dude barely made it out alive, but I Am Thalos is a user who put options trading before school, and so far it has not been working. When Donald Trump started causing major volatility in the market, I Am Thalos felt like there would be a huge spike up. Since he was so confident that the market wouldn't stay down for long, he did what any other reasonable investor would do and deposited all of his student loans into Robinhood. Not wanting to waste any time, he made his first trade at the very end of February. He bought $1,800 worth of SPY puts that expired over a week later, but he got a little scared and sold for a 10% loss 3 minutes later. Okay, not off to the best start, but I'm sure things will pick up. On March 3rd, he bought $900 worth of 0 DTE SPY calls and once again quickly sold for a 40% loss 8 minutes later. Okay, he may have messed up these first 2 trades, but third time's the charm, isn't it? Half an hour later, he bought just under $1,000 worth of more 0 DTE SPY calls, and 5 minutes later he sold for a 34% loss. Usually, after 3 strikes you're out, but this determined trader was just getting started. Only 13 minutes later, he bought $800 worth of more 0 DTE SPY calls and sold for a 69% loss 2 hours later. I Am Thalos knew that he wasn't a bad trader. He was just being held back by his stupid classes. He says he started skipping an early class frequently to make back the loss. But this backfired, and his professor ended up failing him out of the course. Well, at least he made back his losses, right? Welp, with 80% of his school loans gone for the semester, he finally realizes that it's probably gone forever. Big Gamble 3 is a user who went on the craziest run of 2025 so far. He made money faster than anyone else on the subreddit. Starting with just $660, most people wouldn't pay any attention to him. Over the course of the next 5 days, though, he placed countless 0 DTE SPX trades. I want you to take a wild guess as to where his portfolio ended up. You might be thinking, like $0, what most people on WallStreetBets end up with. But actually, you couldn't be further from the truth. He took that $660 into more than $273K. A 414x gain in 5 days would definitely change most people's lives. But he admits that he actually turned $3.6 million into 0 before this. He also says that he is a rich white dude. He withdrew 67.5K from his portfolio, and everyone was waiting for his next move. Some even hoping to see it at $1 million next week. People waited patiently, and a few days later, Big Gamble did not get back to us with an update, but instead deleted his account, which is basically code word for I made some bad trades and lost everything. A lot of users on the subreddit posted about his disappearance, but pretty much everyone agrees that his account probably went straight back down to 0. Tiller Ray is a user who went on a crazy run back in 2024 and came back in 2025 to see if he still had the magic touch. He started with only $600. On February 25th, SPY was trading just below $600. He threw everything into at the money 0 DTE calls. Luckily for him, his position quickly rose to a value of $2,100 later that day. Day 1, he already 3.5x'd his money. Day 2, he threw $2K into more 0 DTE SPY calls and sold for a 42% gain later that day. Not bad at all. The next day, things were about to get wild. He once again YOLO'd everything, except this time it was into puts, not calls. Very early on in the trading day, his portfolio flew from $2,800 to $10K. He was sitting on a $7,000 gain. Except, SPY quickly rose again and completely wiped out all of his gains. He went from being up 7K to down 1,500 in minutes. But he wasn't gonna give up just yet. SPY fell back down and his portfolio was thankfully back in the green by a few $1,000s. He took a deep breath, but didn't sell. And not too long after, he was back in the red by more than $1,000. Tiller Ray says he was beginning to think of what wall to drive into. Then, SPY suddenly fell by 2% over the rest of the trading day, and Tiller Ray's portfolio was back from the dead. He sold for a nearly $12,000 gain and was up over 420% for the day. He 24x'd his money in the past couple days, but he still wasn't ready to call it quits. The next day, he decided he was done with SPY, but not with 0 DTE contracts. He once again YOLO'd everything into 0 DTE Nvidia calls. Nvidia started the trading day just below $118. The stock needed to rise 2.5% just for him to break even, But luckily for him, Nvidia was a monster this day. It peaks at $125. He didn't sell at the peak, but still locked in a 72% gain, which put his portfolio just above 23K. 3 days later, he YOLO'd everything into 0 DTE SPY puts and quickly sold for a $3,000 profit. SPY kept on falling though, and his contracts would have been worth 240K, 10x his portfolio if he just held a few hours longer. 2 days later, he got his hands on another $2,000 gain. He gave us his last update on March 10th and showed us that he successfully took his portfolio to 34.5K. 58xing your portfolio in a week is outrageous, but Ringed Falls is a user like I am Thalos who needed to make some money to pay for college, and like any other smart investor, he turned to good old Wall Street Bets. Ringed Falls initially started posting to the subreddit over a year ago, but the screenshots attached to those have unfortunately been lost to time. We can still see the titles of his posts though, and admittedly, they're a bit concerning. Flash forward to last summer, he threw 4K into SPY calls and nearly doubled his money. He had just about 9K in SPY options, and things were looking bright for him, until he lost $3,400 the next day. No worries though, it was back up the following day, and he sold for over 3K in profit. Sure, Ringed Falls may be in college, but let's be honest, these are baby numbers. He knew that he needed to take it up a notch if he wanted to strike it rich. He perfected his craft, and a few months later, he finally returned with this monstrosity. Ringed Falls lost $18,000 in a single day, most of it within an hour. At this rate, the only education he was going to be able to afford was Hustlers University. Don't worry though, he took another break from the subreddit and studied even harder than last time. He came back to show off his $8,500 HIMS gain, and only 5 days after that, he reached $30,000 in his portfolio, which put him up over 180% over the past month. With the help of meta calls, Hood, and even more HIMS calls, his portfolio miraculously reached $50,000 only 2 days later. Things were finally going good for him, and he could take a deep breath knowing he could start funding his college tuition at a respected university. Until he proceeded to lose 75% of his money the following week. QQQ calls completely shafted him, and he claimed that he was going to close his Robinhood account after that day. Users said, "See ya Monday," and they weren't wrong. That Monday, he came back and YOLO'd everything into 0 DTE QQQ puts. Luckily, it fell not 1, not 2, but 1.18%, and he sold it all for a $31,000 gain for the day. After posting a bit about Playboi Carti and Lil Uzi, he switched to a cash account and somehow kept on making money. Only a day later, he made another $32,000 thanks to more puts. Some users called him out for not closing his account like he said he would. Others encouraged him, and, well, he listened to everyone who jokingly told me to double it. With even more risky options, he made nearly $62K in a day and brought his portfolio to $143,000. Since the end of February, he hasn't given us any updates, so hopefully he still has enough money to help put him through college. CrunchyPie1 is a user who got a ginormous win pretty quickly. He claims to be poor, like really poor, like paycheck to paycheck. Despite that, he usually throws $400 to $800 a month into risky options. This led him to being down $5,000 since the creation of his Robinhood portfolio. He started off the week like usual and threw some money into Robinhood. Thanks to the market's crash, his Nvidia puts paid off big time. On day 2 of his journey, his portfolio was miraculously sitting at 17.3K. Looking at his all-time chart on Robinhood shows that this was the first moment of hope for his portfolio. It would definitely be a shame if he lost it all. Well, a couple days later, he was back at it again. Luckily, his portfolio was now at 25.5K, and it even seems like he withdrew some of it to keep it safe. CrunchyPie has so far stayed in the green, but NOS Joker 21 is a user who may be on the brink of kissing his portfolio goodbye. Joker started off pretty modestly, not even being able to post to WallStreetBets at first. At the end of February, he posted to WallStreetBets about his $1,500 gain with his SPY puts. Joker may have been stuck on bootleg WallStreetBets, but he was determined to make it to the big league. So he immediately got to work. 3 days later, he threw $4,200 into even more 1 DTE SPY puts. The market was just starting to cool down, and he hoped that it would keep on dropping. A day later, he opened up his Webull portfolio and was very delighted to see that his puts were up over 100%. He now had a respectable 11.5k in his account, but he knew that this wouldn't be enough to impress the subreddit. He still had more work to do. He updated us a day later and was already up another $1,500. This was nothing compared to the day he was about to have though. With Tesla's all-new everything's computer, people were drooling over the stock. Okay, maybe not really, but Joker was especially not liking the stock. He bought just under 3k worth of 1 DTE Tesla puts and 0 DTE SPY puts. The market instantly boomed, in a bad way, and his portfolio skyrocketed by 110%. He finally had the confidence to post a WallStreetBets and was immediately wholesomely welcomed. Now he realized he was on a hot streak and there was no way he was gonna stop. The very next day, he posted about Luigi and his $5,300 gain for the day. Except Donald Trump started freaking out on Zelensky, and Joker's money basically got Thanos snapped in seconds. From $31,000 to $8,900 in just an hour, things were not looking good. He eventually sold and ended off the day down 14k. Feeling hurt, he moved back to small street bets. But hey, 3 days later, he made a $5,500 gain in less than an hour with some SPY puts. A day later, he made $5,200 with more SPY puts. Day after that, 7k on MicroStrategy calls. Day after that, he made his way to 30k. Another day later, he was at 40k once again thanks to MicroStrategy. 3 days later, he was at 49k thanks to these Tesla puts. And holy moly, the next day he was at 88.5k. He more than 20x'd his money in 20 days. The next day, he broke $100,000. But things were about to hit the fan. On March 13th, he started off the day with 106k. He threw 90% of it into his specialty, 0 DTE SPY puts. Except, the market didn't look like it wanted to fall that day. His puts pretty quickly got cut in half, setting him back $40,000 for the day. He waited 24 minutes and recouped 22k. Phew! Not really though, he still lost 16% of his portfolio that day. Adding insult to injury, SPY took a complete nosedive right after he sold these puts all the way up until the end of the day. His portfolio would have been worth 230k instead of 66k if he held just a few hours longer. But who really cares? According to him, I'm going in on 0 DTEs tomorrow, so right back at it. A user said, "How much of your portfolio are you using?" All of it, of course. Welp, 4 days later, he diversified his portfolio with some physical investments. But only a day after that, he revealed that his portfolio was magically back up to over 120k, with a big thanks to Tesla. Then, 2 days later, he had another roller coaster day. He started off with 145k, but bought 132k worth of more Tesla puts, which of course basically cost him everything he had in his portfolio. Pretty early on in the trading day, he found himself down nearly $40,000. Was he gonna sell? With an arm like this, I think you know the answer. An hour later, he recouped 10k. 5 minutes after that, another 20k, and minute by minute his puts skyrocketed, eventually bringing his portfolio to 165k. He successfully went from being down 37k to being up $20,000 in the matter of an hour. A week and a half later, he talked about how bearish he was coming up to Liberation Day. His last update was on April 4th, and he somehow cut his portfolio by more than half of what it was a few days prior. He could have made a big withdrawal, or he could have just lost it the old-fashioned way. Wu-Tang is a user who discovered what options were and immediately went all in. Before posting to WallStreetBets, Wu-Tang posted to the sports betting subreddit, where he showed over $10,000 in sports betting losses. After realizing he wasn't making that much money sports betting, he decided to take his talents elsewhere, which was, of course, Robinhood. His first post to WallStreetBets showed off his $6,000 loss in Reddit stock. 3 days later, he threw another 35k into the stock, but was also down another 2,000. At least his portfolio was pretty diversified. 2 days later, he found out that stocks, those are stupid. Options is where it's at. He bought and sold Reddit and Robinhood calls for a $25,000 gain for the day. Minute Little said, "Alright, now turn off options and don't look back." But what the heck kind of advice is that? He was making money, and past performance always guarantees future results. A day after discovering options, he posted, "Tell me why I should not put 100K into DJT. And is DJT a buy right now?" Well, DJT really hasn't been on the up and up, but luckily he bought and sold for a $5,000 profit in just 3 hours. Unfortunately though, things would start to unravel after that day. One day later, he said, "For those of you that told me I should turn options off, you were right." He was down 20K for the day, all thanks to Nvidia. 2 weeks later though, he made about the same amount back with some Reddit puts. That's about all the good news he has for us though, because in the following 3 days, he managed to chop his portfolio down by more than 60%. With 89K left, he said, "Someone give me a winning trade and I'll buy them a car. Let's try to salvage this." Taking all calls and puts. That's where he stopped posting, so who knows if he ever found his winning trade. Bad Open 999 is a user that shows us no one is safe in times of uncertainty. With a mix of in-the-money spy calls and a whole lot of shares, he was down $340,000. Huge loss in just one day. Mr. Trump stole my Christmas. Smart Money 243 is a user who pulled a control the narrative and recorded himself losing millions of dollars. And cherry on top, this was money he inherited from his grandpa. Smart Money started his journey on WallStreetBets about 2 years ago. "Stock went down, yet I lost money on puts. I've been robbed. This is criminal." On March 28th of 2024, he said DJT puts are free money, which would be real ironic considering what his future held. After a few posts about Norfolk, let's flash forward to January 17th of this year. DJT was trading at just around $40, and he revealed that he YOLO'd nearly 1.3 mil into calls on the stock to try and capitalize off the hype around the inauguration. He privately bought these a few weeks prior and was already down over 120K. Worse than that, he felt like he was about to lose even more money and that this play may ruin his life. He knows he got caught holding the bag, but all he wanted to know now was whether or not things would be smooth sailing. He made a couple posts to the DJT stock subreddit talking about how everyone needed to man up. The stock was bound to go to the moon, so quit your complaining. Well, only a day later, he made another post that wasn't so optimistic. "I'm a pathetic loser full of hopium." Smart Money 243 said, "I'm making bullish comments and post on DJT, but I know it's over. We're not even at Tuesday. Nothing has happened yet, but I know I've made the worst decision of my life." He says DJT is guaranteed to crash. Why the heck did he have to throw Grandpa's hard-earned money on it? That gosh darn stupid Trump coin sucked all the money that would have been thrown at the stock instead. It's so over. But he ultimately doesn't give a hoot. He just hopes his grandpa forgives him, and now hates Trump for supposedly helping him ruin his life. Your average investor would probably say something like, "Hey man, why don't you just cut your losses and take this as a $100,000 lesson?" But Smart Money is not your average investor. Over the weekend, he posted how scared he was and wanted to know what people would do if they lost all their money. All he got in return was a link to a Wendy's application. Finally, the market opened on Monday, and Smart Money recorded his live reaction. With this strange bag on his head, is this Control the Narrative making a secret comeback? Okay, maybe not, but he is definitely gonna need that bag to vomit in after he stops recording because holy smokes did things go bad. A lot of users would talk smack about him YOLOing the money his grandpa worked for, but other users like Early Monk just wanted to know what was up with his post history. Smart Money was now down $430,000. Was he gonna sell and walk away with 830K left? Nope. Later that day, he updated us with a new screenshot showing us that he was down another 180K. A questionable post later, and he was now down $700,000 total. Smart Money told the subreddit, "You guys tricked me into buying this." He made a follow-up post saying his wife wants to divorce him, but I'm thinking that this is just a joke. Hopefully. He also claims to have finally reached enlightenment after a user called him out on his YOLO. He's gonna use his years of experience, education, and, apparently critical thinking to better his life, maybe even put it all into VOO. He says he's brave and courageous and now just wants to journal for his mental health. Despite his marriage being in shambles, he's now in a zen-like state and wants to take a break from Reddit. Well, he made another post later that day to let us know another 20K was chipped off of his portfolio. After speaking more words of wisdom, he returned the next day to show that he was now down $800,000. By January 27th, this loss grew another $200,000 to the big seven-figure mark. Despite being down 80%, he says he's not selling. Ever. The story might sound like it ends there, but right after this whole fiasco, Apple's The T came out with a hit piece on smart money. Story of the guy losing his inheritance in DJT is fake/embellished. If you use a tool to look at deleted Reddit posts, you'll be able to find that over a year ago, on the same day that his account was created, the following message can be found. I'll sum it up so you don't have to read the whole thing. Yes, I've built quite the post history. You're such a sweaty loser for having combed through all of it. No, it's not hard to become a WallStreetBets legend. They are the largest collective of idiots on the internet. From the YouTube documentaries to the WallStreetBets memes, they are completely ignorant of the truth. No, this post was not edited after the fact to fit the current situation. People never dig deeper to see what's under the surface. It's sad yet entertaining to witness so much ignorance. Apple's The T messaged Smart Money and he responded with, "Wow, you are good, lol. Pretty crazy to plan a troll a year in advance, haha, but good job. Out of curiosity, how do you manage to dig that stuff?" This is all some pretty incriminating evidence, but the thing is that we still don't know if Smart Money's post was real or not. Apple's To T thinks maybe the amount that Smart Money shows is only half of his position in DJT, but that is also put into question because Smart Money of course showed screen recordings of his whole portfolio. A lot of people seem to agree that the trade was probably real after checking the options chain, which obviously can't be fakes, but feel like the whole story behind it is probably embellished or completely fake. Either way, this whole story was pretty crazy, and the trade itself was actually probably real for all we know, or at least part of a spread. So let me know what you guys think about it down below in the comments. Long Was Here is a user who we've covered before, but unlike Smart Money, is actually very trusted within the community. We last covered him back in November, and since then, he has no joke made tens of millions of dollars worth of trades. Towards the end of 2024, here are some of his notable trades. Making $200K with Dogecoin, a $600,000 gain on Dell calls, $170K worth of gains from MicroStrategy, throwing millions into the same stock, gifting $10,000 to a friend's older sibling who used to give him car rides back in the day, and ending off the year by showing his $3.2 million position in Rivian. This all happened in the last month and a half of 2024, and the crazy part is that this isn't even the crazy part yet. He took it up at least 10 notches starting off 2025. A week into 2025, he placed a bunch of trades on Nvidia. It was January 6th, and Nvidia was trading at the highest price it had ever been in history. After it was all said and done, he walked away with about $200,000 in gains for the day. The very same day, he realized that it wasn't time to walk away just yet. He threw $1.7 million into puts on the stock. Only a few hours later, his contracts were up $124K. Then, a bit after that, he sold it all for a $250,000 gain. If he would have held 4 more days, his position would have 3x to $6 million. But hey, I'm not making $250,000 trades anyway, so I can't really judge. A few weeks later, he bought calls on 3x leveraged China Bull shares in honor of Chinese New Year. And just like that, another $200,000 gain in the books. 3 days later, he got ready to make one of his craziest trades yet. Rolling into February, he posted, "Dear Canada/Mexico, I would like one trade war please, preferably today, but can do over the weekend too, thanks." Long threw just under $1 million into at-the-money SPY puts that expired one trading day later, and it was Friday. If things didn't get wild over the weekend, his position could expire worthless. He posted this at 12:03 p.m. and was unfortunately down 33%, losing him $330,000 for the day. But to Long's surprise, something catastrophic was about to happen only an hour later. A few hours later, he posted a screenshot of his puts that were now up over $1 million for the day. This means they 3x'd in just 3 hours of the day. Long somehow did not feel like selling though, and was willing to hold over the weekend. He complained a bit about market manipulation, but this didn't matter. Everything went his way in the end. Markets were rough Monday morning, and Long's portfolio was looking better than ever. His puts were worth over $4.5 million and up 361% since he bought them. That means the puts fell 50% after buying them, then 9x'd in value to get him to this point, which is definitely a roller coaster of a trade. Smelly Fingernail is a user who can somehow read the prophecy. On January 24th, He bought 19K worth of Nvidia puts and said that China has trained a state-of-the-art model with barely any compute costs. It's over for the Nvidia train. A lot of people sat back and laughed at Smelly Fingernail. Sounds like calls to me. I have a spoiler for you. You also need GPUs to run AI models effectively. This has nothing to do with Nvidia. Nvidia produces the GPUs, not the AI models. True regard. You are dumbs. And so many more. Things were off to a decent start that day, and his puts rose to 27K by the end of the trading week. He was up 43%, but he was confident that Nvidia still had some more falling to do. In fact, he made the bold prediction that the stock would have a huge gap down on Monday. He gave a few good reasons as to why this would happen, basically saying that DeepSeek's effect on Nvidia would be massive. More haters rolled through in the comments with, "Bro needs to read more about DeepSeek. These will expire worthless." And bears desperately trying to push this agenda to cling to the last of their welfare checks. Little did Smelly Fingernail know, he was about to prove everyone wrong, by a lot. That Monday, the bell rung, and holy moly, Nvidia was not headed to the moon, but actually straight back down to wherever it came from on Earth. Nvidia was immediately down 12% at open, and Smelly Fingernail came back to the subreddit to let everyone know he was the chosen one. His $19,000 position rocketed to more than $100,000 of value. Best part about the whole situation is that he actually locked in his profits for just under 100K total. This was impeccable timing, because the very next trading day, Nvidia jumped 9%. He basically bought and sold at the perfect time. Broken Bear is a user who started his journey on WallStreetBets with only $800. Accounts this size might get booed off the court, but boy oh boy did he come out swinging. He decided to focus on trading QQQ and throw in a few AMD calls. His first day of trading, he took his $800 into 2100. 148% in a day is crazy, but he had an even crazier trade the following day, up 169% to 5.1K. Back at it again the next day for another $2.2 thousand gain, and honestly, he just kept winning his trades over the next few days, so let's breeze through them. 9.6K to 12.2K, 16K to 18.1K, finally to 25.3K on January 20th. After 31xing his money in a week, Broken Bear was no longer broken. After being asked if he took his money and ran, he said, we'll see what happens on Tuesday. Ha 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 ha. He better hope his AMD calls pull through. He also picked up an additional 5K worth of Netflix calls. The very next day, Netflix reported their earnings, and to his delight, the company added more subscribers to their platform in a quarter than ever before in history. The stock jumped nearly 10%, and with the help of a few other positions, Broken Bear's portfolio had once again doubled in value. Up 6,800% from his start 2 weeks ago, he now had a portfolio worth $50,000. No break needed. He threw 20K into at-the-money DJT puts that expired just a few weeks later. The stock fell over 10% the next day, and his puts doubled in value. He didn't want to sell yet though. He was waiting for the stock to fall an additional $3 to $26.50. Broken Bear is seemingly still YOLOing his money, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things end up for him. Convex Dominant 6 is a user who we've covered not too long ago, but he's already back making big moves as always. At the start of January, Convex Dominance felt like Nvidia was primed to make him some money. On January 2nd, Nvidia was trading at just about $138. Convex Dominance woke up that morning and thought he might as well throw 133K into options that expire tomorrow. Nvidia ripped 4.5% the next day alone, and his calls flew up 542%, taking his position to 857K. 3 days later, he was back at it again. This time, he decided to get in on the DJT hype before the inauguration. Sounds a little familiar. Anyway, he threw $324,000 into way out of the money calls that expired in 3 weeks. This is of course a risky play given DJT's pretty much meme stock status at this point, but his trade was off to a good start and he was up over 20K before the day was even over. Over the next 3 days though, the stock fell 2.5% and things were moving slower than expected. It was the weekend and the stock needed some rest for what was to come on Monday. On this exciting Monday, DJT jumped 21.5%. Convex Dominance had doubled his money. It seems like he sold enough to cover his initial cost and let the rest ride out to the moon. Well, flash forward 2 weeks, and the contracts would have expired worthless if he held. He never mentioned if he walked away with a gain, but it seems like he at least broke even based on his replies. 11 days later, Convex Dominance came back with a YOLO 3 times as big as his last one. He YOLO'd almost $1 million into a stock that is down 70% over the past 3 years. The stock in question was Block. Convex Dominance talked about how the CEO of the company, Jack Dorsey, is a huge Bitcoin bull. He also brings up Block's increasing revenue, but relatively stagnant share price, which may hint that the stock is undervalued. He says Block is just as much of a Bitcoin play as these other companies that have rocketed in the past 4 months. The only problem was that Jack Dorsey likes to move a bit mysteriously and doesn't like to pump his own stock like a few other CEOs do. That being said, Block was destined to pump at least about 15%. On January 8th, he threw $800K into out-of-the-money calls that expired a month and a half later. 2 weeks later, his position rose 25% to the big $1 million mark. Since then, he hasn't given us any new updates, but assuming he held, his calls would be up another 175K as of February 1st. C-Benefit 1818 is someone who got a gain most of us can only dream of. C-Benefit started off pretty modestly though. Back on December 5th, he threw $1,700 into 1 DTE Amazon calls and quickly 4x'd his money. A few weeks later, he threw $10K into Google puts, and honestly, things were looking a bit scary. His calls expired the next day, and he was only in the money by 40 cents, which meant he wasn't very likely to make any profit on the trade. Luckily for him though, the whole market was down the next day, and Google in particular was down 1.5%. He didn't want to wait for his calls to be exercised, so he sold them that morning for a $14,000 gain. A week later, on January 2nd, he made a quick move and bought some out-of-the-money 1 DTE Netflix puts for $27K. He didn't even wait a day though, and sold them a few hours later for a $25,000 gain. The very next day, he updated us with his now $62,000 portfolio that was up 1,300% the past month thanks to his plays on Netflix and Google. Even after 14xing his portfolio, he still wanted more. 3 days later, he threw $32K into SPY calls, and just like that, he walked away with another $19,000 gain. C-Benefit took the notch and turned it all the way up to level 100 though, because on the same exact day, he bought $93,000 worth of 0 DTE SPY puts. So he got a 60% gain on 0 DTE SPY calls that morning, sold them, proceeded to take a full 180 and YOLO'd everything into options contracts that were aiming in the opposite direction. As crazy as it is, this led him to having his most successful day yet. That 93K turned into 149K in a few hours. His total portfolio was now worth $150,000, and he was up 160% for the day alone. He was up 3,100% over the past month, but since January 6th, he hasn't given us any updates, so hopefully his portfolio is still good and well. Short Lemon 4355 is a user who just quit his job to trade options full-time. Short Lemon said he was making about $2,400 a month after taxes from his job and was just overall sick and tired of the work conditions he was put through. He decided he was done with the rat race and figured he could make enough money trading options anyway. The big kicker though was that Short Lemon only had $1,500 in his portfolio. He admits that he's always been an impulsive risk taker, but I think we can all agree that he's jumping the gun quite a bit early by retiring with most people's monthly rent. Anyway, he quit his job and got to work on Robinhood. Luckily for him, things were off to a positive start. His first 2 weeks of being a full-time trader, he got $3,000 in gains, which means that he 3x'd his money. 2 weeks after that, and he made another $1,200. Short Lemon just made double his monthly pay and says that he has never been happier with the freedom. Short Lemon started getting a bit cocky though by making posts like, "I quit my job with $1,500. Now I'm making $5,000 a month." He even launched his campaign and posted to the Ask Me Anything subreddit, willing to bless people with all the professional knowledge he gained over the past month. Maximum Elderberry 97 said he didn't even pay taxes on the profit or bills yet. Not sustainable. LMFAO. This kid is gonna work at Wendy's less than 3 months from now. Short Lemon said, no. It's already been a month and a half. Let's see if I can make it another month and a half. He even says that he can start a corporation to mitigate taxes. Just the price he has to pay for his freedom. Lucky Ducky is a user who, well, is a lucky duck. After losing again and again, he finally got his hands on a crazy trade. Lucky Ducky's story begins a couple years ago, except he wasn't initially trading with lots of money. Only at the end of 2024 did he start taking things to the next level. He allowed $1,500 into Archer calls and almost 14x'd his money. Now with $20,000 in his portfolio, he was ready to make his next big trade. Except his next big trade would lose him 5k, and the one after that would lose him 7k, and the one after that brought him down to about $5,000 total in his portfolio. Lucky Ducky couldn't believe he had just blown through most of his gains. He figured it was time to pick everyone's favorite trading strategy, and that was trading 0 DTE SPY contracts. Nothing else to really add to the story, he just went from 6k to 19k to 30k to finally 101k. Lucky Ducky 20x'd his money, but unlike some other users on the subreddit, he acknowledges that luck was a huge part of his win. He didn't really know what he was doing, like most of us, but things just so happened to go his way. Ultimately, Will Win is a user who traded himself into debt. His story starts off fairly pleasant though, with his first post being made on August 18th. His Oscar Health shares were up nearly $4,900 and worth just about 75k in total. His portfolio wasn't very diverse, but as long as Oscar Health kept on rising, he would be a-okay. Things were not a-okay. He sold Oscar Health and lost it all in risky options. The worst part of it is that this loss wasn't even fueled with his own savings. Instead, he took out a $50,000 personal loan hoping that he would be able to double or triple it. Now, he's 50k in the can and wants to know if there's a chance to recover or if he should just quit trading. He said that he shared this so that others can learn and avoid repeating his mistakes. He planned on seeking God's help and getting on the straight and narrow. A week and a half later though, we got another update and he definitely didn't quit trading. He made his way up to 11.3k from $1,800. A week ago, I posted about my huge loss and drowning in debt. Instead of completely quitting, I decided to fight back. I am hoping I can repeat this cycle again next week and finally dig myself out of this hole. Some people left optimistic comments, but others kept it pretty real. A few days later, he was feeling very bearish and threw $6,000 into 0 DTE SPY puts. Usually, I would say that this was a horrible idea, because it was, but it was October 10th. AKA the day that Trump announced 130% tariffs on China. SPY fell 2.7% by the end of the day, and his puts were miraculously worth $170,000. Except he didn't own those puts anymore. Instead of holding throughout the day, he sold for a $570 gain that morning. That old guy 7863 said, "Yo, no one ever went broke taking profits, bruh." But our professional trader said, "My man, I am already broke. This would have changed my portfolio and life." Just under 7k in his portfolio, it doesn't seem like he's gonna catch a break anytime soon. Another user pointed out that he's driving with 5% battery left while screenshotting Robinhood to post to WallStreetBets. So yeah, really just think about that and let that sink in. Wandering Tofu is a user who has made and lost millions of dollars all in the past few months. Wandering Tofu's most recent post was just made in the middle of October, but his journey on WallStreetBets starts back in 2020. With 83 cents in his portfolio and a $26,000 loss for the year, things weren't looking promising at all. Apparently, he was buying GameStop calls, but he was just a month too early. It's also funny looking at the comments where people made fun of him for having a $24 GameStop call and a $40 Palantir call, cause of course, those had historical legendary runs. I would show you his profit on GameStop when it finally did start pumping in 2021, but instead of posting screenshots of his portfolio, he just kept on posting this meme of a chimpanzee astronaut. There were some signs that he made money though. Wandering Tofu took a few year-long break from posting to the subreddit, but finally came back in 2025. A lot of portfolios took a tumble on Liberation Day, but his took an especially big tumble With only $500 in his portfolio after starting the year with 124K, Wandering Tofu says that Nvidia calls just got the best of him. He wasn't going to quit his trading journey though, so he deposited another $10,000 and got back to work. Google's share price dipped quite a bit, but Wandering Tofu felt like it was massively underpriced. The stock was trading at about $150 a share, but he felt like it would make its way up to $250 in no time. That being said, he YOLO'd into calls that expired in about 2 months. And by August 13th, his trade definitely paid off. He posted a screenshot of his portfolio that was now worth $286,000. He rode Google's wave from 150 bucks to 200 and took 10K to not even just 286K, because he said that he also made a $50,000 withdrawal. So once you adjust for that, he really made his way to 336K. Wandering Tofu stayed humble though and said not to celebrate too early and check back in with him at the end of the year to see if he held on to his profit. 11 days later, he in fact did not lose it all. His portfolio rose over $90,000 just for the day and was now worth over $500,000. But that's not even the crazy part. The following day was a very fruitful one. Google won an antitrust lawsuit and the stock rose over 9% for the day. His once $10,526 portfolio was now worth more than $1.5 million. Only Farmers said, "You, sir, are about to be your own wife's boyfriend." It gets even crazier from there because he stayed bullish on Google and took his $1.5 million portfolio to $3.8 million on Monday, October 6th. But this would end up being a bearish week for the stock, unfortunately. Google fell by just about 6%, but Wandering Tofu's portfolio fell by a whole lot more than just 6%. 3.78 million turned into 1.6. So yeah, he lost over $2 million in a week. He went from 124K to 500, deposited 10K, and went to almost 3.8 million and was now back down to 1.6 mil. But instead of quitting while he was ahead, he wanted to keep on pushing his luck. He held 4,000 Google calls at the $255 strike price and 900 Apple calls at the $260 strike price. This was his latest update, and these calls expire at the end of the month, so only time will tell if he's gonna end up back at Wendy's again. Jolliffe is a user that made so much money that his wife finally came back to him. Jolliffe started off his trading journey with just about $90,000 back in April. He was scrolling through YouTube and stumbled across a video talking about how AI was gonna completely destroy humanity in the future. This is when he first learned about ChatGPT, which is honestly a little bit late. He must have been living under a rock the past few years, but anyway, he was pretty impressed with it. So much so that he was willing to bet his life savings on it. He asked ChatGPT what the big AI plays were, enabled margin on his Robinhood account, and threw everything on the line. Flash forward a few months, and his $90,000 portfolio grew to 205K. Best of all, he actually sold and locked in his gains. My wife is absolutely thrilled with my genius fiscal performance. So much so that I'm her new boyfriend now. All jokes aside, this is more money than both of their yearly salaries combined, so he is very grateful. Andy Top is a user who likes flying very close to the sun. He's actually been making interesting investments for over a year and a half now. Back in March of 2024, he said, "I think I am cooked." Down about $2,600 on Nvidia calls, things were looking risky, but these were still honestly baby numbers. Don't worry though, he was working on it, and only one day later, he came back with more. He was down about 95% over the past month, and now his portfolio was worth just under $400. 2 months later, he posted a screenshot of his DWAC, aka DJT puts, that were actually up about $500. Except it doesn't look like he sold, and the stock literally doubled in price the next week, which would have completely wrecked these puts. Don't worry though, he was about to actually start making profitable trades. Or maybe not, because he posted this only 5 days later. Okay, for real this time, maybe he was ready to turn his portfolio green. His next trade was a very modest one, because, well, his portfolio didn't have much money in it anymore. But anyway, he threw about $600 into out-of-the-money Oracle calls that expired in a week and a half. Oracle reported earnings that night, and to the surprise of investors, they had gobsmacking cloud demand numbers. The stock immediately jumped over 20% after hours, and Andy Top crapped his pants. Robinhood's contract value simulator showed a nearly $19,000 gain, which would be all his as long as Oracle held its price. And sure enough, it did, and he sold for $21K. $600 to $21,000 gave him a much needed win, but he got back to the reckless trading only 2 weeks later. He posted a screenshot of his unrealized $2,500 loss on Apple, and just what the heck. 1 week after that, he was back at square one. He completely wiped out all the gains he got with Oracle and was now back down to just about break even for the month. With only $46 in buying power, he had his whole portfolio riding on ARM calls, and the stock actually did fairly well the week after that. He made an edit saying that his portfolio went back up to 16K, but he didn't post any more screenshots after that, so hopefully things are going smoothly. I'm Suffy is a user who almost destroyed his portfolio, but his first ever post was a pleasant screenshot of his portfolio that was up $8,700 for the month. He said, "Massive gains as a part-time trader. Should I keep the momentum?" A week later, he had even better news, up 10.7K just for the week. A week after that, he made his way up to 43K with a $32,000 gain for the past month. And a month after that, he posted a screenshot showing he was up $28,000 just for the day. So honestly, he was doing very well. It seemed like he was pretty consistently making money, and so far he didn't post any big losing trades. That's what it seemed like, but his next post 2 weeks later definitely took that all away. Down 99% year to date, his portfolio was now only worth $700. And it's even crazier looking at the spikes on his chart, seeing that he very consistently hit the same peak and came back to life 3 times. With only $7 in buying power, his next post was about Amazon Flex, so it seems like he did the reasonable thing and stepped away from recklessly trading and focused on working to make more money. A year went by with no updates from him, so it seemed like he called it quits there. That was until August 6th of this year. He made a few day trades this day, buying 2 DTE Shopify calls for $1,600 and selling for $4,900 later that day. And right after that, he threw $1,500 into more 2 DTE Apple puts, but started to get worried, so he sold for just a $150 profit. Eli Lilly reported earnings the following morning, and they actually beat expectations pretty hard, but had disappointing late-stage trial results for their oral obesity drug, which was ultimately more important to investors. The stock immediately opened in the red, but Suffy felt like it would fall quite a bit more throughout the day. That being said, he YOLO'd $7,000 into out-the-money 1 DTE puts. The stock kept falling that day and ended off down just over 14%. Which was great news for him. His portfolio was now worth 25.8K, and he was up 105% for the day. And even crazier is that he said he started with only $600 and some change a week prior. So he was on a pretty crazy streak, 40xing his money. A month later, he bought about $10,000 of 1 DTE Oracle puts after they reported earnings. The stock jumped almost 40% after earnings, so he figured it had to come back down at least a little. And come back down at least a little it did, falling 11% in 2 days. He sold on the day of expiration for a $15,000 gain. A week later, he was up 10K for the day, but only had $22,000 in his portfolio, which is less than before. And knowing his history, it's hard to say if he withdrew that money or if he gave it back to the market the old-fashioned way. Anyway, 6 days later, he saw the government shutdowns and thought, why not buy more calls? Which took his portfolio all the way up to $61,000. And holy smokes, 2 days later, he got another $35,000 gain with some more Tesla puts. It seemed like he was due for a loss pretty soon, but he threw $5,500 into AMD puts and $1,000 into SPY puts. The following day was once again the 130% China day, so his portfolio flew up 570%. That was great, but it means that he started the day with 7K. I'm just gonna assume he withdrew most of his money before this and didn't just crash it down to $7,000, hopefully. 3 days later though, the house of cards finally came crashing down. He started off the day with $30,000 in his Robinhood portfolio, and pretty early on, he was down $19,500. Even though he was down 64%, he kept on trading that day, buying both calls and puts. Lo and behold, His portfolio jumped back all the way up to $65,000 by the end of the day. Suffy has been on an insane journey, but that was the last update we got from him, so hopefully he stays in the green. Distinct Muffin 5058 is a user who is not from WallStreetBets, but instead the options subreddit. But honestly, it seems like his mental capacities line up pretty well with WallStreetBets. Basically, Distinct Muffin was scrolling through Reddit and came across someone claiming to make 100K with institutional data. He would bless people with his mentorship for the low price of just $5,000. And guess what? Distinct Muffin was sold, but he didn't quite have the full 5K. He said he only had $600 of birthday money, so he sent over half of that to the unknown investor. He also had his dad chip in another $1,000. Distinct Muffin, his dad, and this unknown investor all got on a Zoom call. His dad felt like they just got scammed, but Distinct Muffin had faith and kept on sending him a few $100s here and there. But 2 weeks ago, Distinct Muffin posted, "Beware of this scammer." Unsurprisingly, Broderick pulled a fast one on him. Most people commented that they didn't understand how someone could be so foolish. He wrote a really long story and I skipped over a lot of details, but hopefully he makes smarter choices in the future. Carbs Are Good is a user who has been walking on a tightrope after downloading Robinhood. His first relevant post was not to WallStreetBets, but instead to the day trading subreddit where he showed off his day trading setup. Opening Mechanic 1051 said, "Take some of those profits and finish painting the rest of your walls." And someone else said, "Boy, are you sitting on a treadmill?" 2 months later, he finally showed off his portfolio and it was currently all in on T-Rex 2x inverse leverage micro strategy. He was already down almost 52K for the day, which is weird because his poster on the wall didn't have the yearly calculation for that. 6 months later, it looks like he loaded a whole lot more money into his Robinhood account. He had $2 million on the app, but he just threw 1.1 mil into open. The stock wasn't doing all that well at the time, so he pretty quickly lost $250,000. Hopefully it bounces back up on its own, he says. He must have been pretty shaken up after this because he went straight to the dividend subreddit asking for advice on where to park his money. But 12 days later, he came back with some positive news actually. He sold SMCX shares, which was a 2x leveraged SMCI ETF, for $140,000 in profit. Destroy Then Seek is a user who spent his birthday getting wild on Robinhood. On October 9th, he YOLO'd his whole portfolio, which was just about $5,000 on path calls. This turned out to be a pretty lucky move because the stock jumped 19% that day. But guess what? His birthday was coming up 4 days later, so he decided to have some nice, harmless fun with 0DTE options. Okay, maybe it wasn't very harmless. I effed up entirely, and wow, do I have the stats to show it. Dole Produce 2308 is a user who has had his fair share of ups and downs on WallStreetBets. Back on June 26th, he was feeling risky and threw 11.6K into app Lovin' calls that expired a week later. The stock opened in the red for the day, but started taking off pretty quickly, giving Dole Produce a $6,000 unrealized profit. Possum Turd told him that he probably should have sold, but Dole Produce responded with, "Usually I don't hold positions overnight, but I have a good feeling about this one." Oh, you have a good feeling about it? I'm all in. But it turns out he did make the right move and sold 4 days later for a $10.4 thousand profit. 2 days later, he wanted to push his luck even further and threw $9,600 into Nvidia calls that expired a week later. And somehow, he was right yet again, making a quick and easy $3,000 profit. 2 weeks later, he went even bigger and threw just about $8,000 into Nvidia calls. And honestly, there's no way to sugarcoat it, because the stock was going hard, bringing Dole Produce a $36,000 gain. Young Neil said, "Why are you hiding the numbers like it's your social security?" Which is even more strange when you can just do some simple math to find out what the numbers were, but whatever. Only 2 weeks later, he was feeling very bullish on Meta, so he threw nearly $20,000 into calls that expired about 2 months later. But Meta reported stupendous earnings and Dole Produce locked in a $52,000 profit. In Zuck we trust indeed. A month later, he got another nice $47,000 gain on CrowdShare, but 1 week after that, he posted a screenshot that wasn't so nice. Down $56,000 on Costco calls, He says it's not realized if you don't close the position. Gemini of Wall Street is a user who YOLO'd into calls while he was under the influence, and things went interestingly. It was a Friday before a 3-day weekend, and he said he just took a real difficult exam. He went back home and got absolutely blasted before he started trading, which is always a smart idea. He looked at the upcoming earnings releases for the week and saw that good old Walmart was gonna have their earnings call the following Tuesday. Costco had a pretty solid earnings report just before this, and that was all Gemini needed to see before he YOLO'd on calls. He typed in wall and quickly bought 100 calls. He put his phone down and went about his day as usual. Not really too worried since he still had the weekend ahead of him. But eventually he realized, hey, Walmart's ticker is not Wall, it's actually WMT. He just bought 100 calls of Western Alliance. He didn't buy Walmart calls, he bought Wall March 15th calls. That being said, he eagerly waited for the weekend to be over so that he could sell these calls that he didn't even want in the first place. When it finally opened on Tuesday, he decided not to sell these calls, but actually FOMO into 100 calls on Walmart for real this time. He was already down quite a bit on Western Alliance, but it was all good since he knew he was about to bring in that gravy with Walmart that night. The only problem was that Walmart was up quite a bit, so he bought at a fairly high price. And just cutting to the chase, here's the aftermath. Gemini of Wall Street wants everyone to learn the importance of double checking the stock ticker before you hit that buy button. Tanner Bayer is a user who mainly uses Reddit to help him sell real estate, but on one special day, he got a gain so delightful that he had to post to WallStreetBets. It was December 19th back in 2023, and Tanner had been day trading NASDAQ 100 futures consistently since his main job as a realtor was pretty slow that year. He felt like the market was due for a correction anytime soon after its strong rally through 2023. He crafted some technical analysis, and that was all he needed to throw money on 0 DTE puts. The index thankfully didn't rocket, but it did go up a little bit for the day with a 0.5% increase. He sold for an $1,800 loss, but still felt confident the market was due for a correction. So the next day, he bought even more 0 DTE NDX puts. He spent just about $1,100, which wasn't much, but it was of course a very risky trade that would likely fall in value. He left his place to go do some showings, but as soon as he was leaving, he realized that he was already up 450% with a $5,000 unrealized gain. Not too long after that, this $5,000 gain grew to $12K. Even though he was up 1,100%, he didn't want to sell. He placed a stop loss in case things took a turn, but of course hoped the fall would continue. While he was out showing a lease listing, he looked at his phone and was shocked to see that his $1,000 position was now worth just a bit more than $100,000. His puts were up 9,500% and he sold for a $103,000 gain. OneMall4203 is a user who has YOLO'd hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past few years, all the way into 2025, and has even met Jerome Powell. Even though this user has blown up his portfolio as recently as 2025, he's actually been blowing up portfolios since 2023. Taking a quick trip back in time, OneMall's first post to WallStreetBets was one that definitely showed he was in the right place. From 2018 to the end of 2022, he took $20,000 to $334K, then straight back down to $10K. His next post after that one was not a screenshot of his portfolio, but actually an email from his university letting him know that Jerome frickin' Powell was gonna be in the building. He asked the subreddit what he should ask at the event and got responses like, ask him if he enjoys screwing over our calls or puts better, and what he thinks about lowering Ds. Well, the day of reckoning came along and OneMall said, Jay shook my hand when I first arrived because I arrived late and I almost bumped into him entering the boardroom. My palms were sweating like crazy, but I think he could tell how scared I was, so he was pretty nice with me in his demeanor. He asked Jerome Powell about inflation and the Federal Reserve's role in reducing it. Well, meeting J-Pow had OneMall feeling pretty enlightened, so he went back to trading risky options. Reflecting on his 20 to 330 to 10K journey, he started sharing his trades again towards the end of 2023. On September 1st, 2023, he day traded Tesla puts and made $5,000. And guess freaking what? He was ready to flip-flop it. He got rid of those dumb puts and got calls instead. And these also blessed him with a $5,000 gain only 2 trading days later. He said, I made $5K on Tesla puts Friday, swapped them for calls to make another $5K. This is too easy. And then guess what? He made a post one day later and showed that he was up another $4,800 for the day thanks to his Palantir calls, Coinbase calls, Delta Airline calls, and finally AMD puts. If I keep making 5K every day, I might actually get out of debt in this lifetime. One Mall's portfolio was now worth about $22,000, but it only seems like $50 of it was on the sidelines. Someone commented, "Don't fall victim to the hot hand fallacy," but One Mall replied with, "No hot hand fallacy. I'm unstoppable. I'm on fire. Give me more of those nose beers." 2 days later, Coinbase, Palantir, and Tesla were all rocketing, so One Mall sold his calls that morning for a $12,000 daily gain. He now had just over $38,000 in his portfolio, which is pretty impressive considering it was only worth about $6,000 a week before this. He said, "Up 15K, not out of debt yet." This led to the natural question, student loans or medical debt? And One Mall replied with, "Nah, gambling loans. I gambled to get in debt and gambled to get out." Well, a week later, it seems like he's not going to be able to pay off that loan. Down $30,000 for the day, and with an unrealized loss of 53K, things are looking rough. This means he made his way up past 60K before this post too, but just lost the majority of it. Don't worry though. He was determined to make his money back in no time. A few weeks later, he made a pretty decent trade on Palantir, where he was up almost $15,000 for the day and had a portfolio worth about 40K once again. But looking at his asset allocation, we see that he is pretty much all in on these calls, so he's definitely still riding on the wild side. After a few more trades, he made his way all the way back up to just about 70K. Mainly thanks to Tesla. Only one day later, he sold his Tesla calls and went heavier on Coinbase. He was down 7K on Palantir, 8K on Alibaba, but up 25K on Coinbase. And only one day after that, he started YOLOing everything into 1DTE Uber puts. This made him a whole lot of money.
Psych!
This lost him a whole lot of money, and his puts were down almost 83K. Just to sum up One Mall's journey so far, he went from 20 to 334K, then straight back down to 10K, then all the way up to 60K, then bang, down to 12K, then up to 90K, then back down to just 5K. But going off of his logic, this meant he was due for an upswing soon, so he quickly got back to trading. He made so many trades throughout 2024, but here are just a few of them. A $15,000 gain on Coinbase puts, another $20,000 gain on more Coinbase puts, and a $19,000 gain on more Coinbase puts. He decided to switch things up on April 10th and YOLO'd $43,000 on 0DTE SPY calls. This was a choppy day for the market, and with only 1 hour left before the market closed, he was down almost 22K. In 30 minutes, Robinhood would automatically sell his calls, and it didn't look like the market was gonna turn green anytime soon. Except it did, and his calls jumped 46K in those 30 minutes. Luckily, he was able to sell for a $24,000 gain instead of a $21,000 loss. He took a long break from posting, but when he came back, he had quite a wild screenshot. Instead of trading on Robinhood, he was trading on Schwab, and apparently, he went from 1K to 25K, back to 0, then straight back up to 25K. His switch over to Schwab makes me wonder if his Robinhood portfolio is still with us. He said, "Thinking I should probably try trading some more conservative things, like 1DTEs or even weeklies." Well, now jumping ahead all the way to January of 2025, we see that he made his way all the way up to over 100K again, but fell all the way down to a nice balance of negative 5,000. Also, his journey up until this point wasn't very calm either. One Mall said, "I'm experimenting with using quantitative methods to identity trends and trade short-term options. I got to 100K last week and was irresponsible, but now I know what happens if I get assigned on options." Someone commented, "You have a gambling addiction and should stop." W. Shea is a user whose trading abilities have put the security of his family at risk. His journey didn't start off this grim though. His first post on Reddit was pretty tame, and instead of being on the WallStreetBets subreddit, he actually posted it to r/stocks. This post was made way back in October of 2019, and he was thinking about quitting his trading journey. He made $3,000 on big tech stocks like Facebook and Apple, but proceeded to lose $8,000 on Parsley Energy. His concern showed that he probably probably should just throw his money into a safe ETF and forget about it. Instead of buying ETFs, he started looking into biopharmaceutical stocks with upcoming FDA announcements, which we all know are very safe investments. He made posts asking for advice on a few of his, quite frankly, terrible stock picks, and in the mix, we also find this post. He admits that his portfolio is leaking money everywhere, and that even though he's buying the dip kinda just keeps on dipping. That being said, he was ready to move on from stocks, move on from risky FDA trades, and well, move on to the surefire way to make money in the market. Options. 3 weeks later, he got ready for another big trade. It wasn't an options trade, but it was another FDA one. It was December 10th, and he had about $18,500 worth of CORV stock. He asked what we thought about the stock and said that he hoped the FDA meeting didn't make it drop another 40%. The stock closed that day at $1.84 a share, but my freaking goodness, it opened at 70 cents a share the next morning. This was a 62% drop overnight, and he lost $11,500 just like that. He said, lol, 60% down pre-market. I don't think my share's worth more than a piece of now. Note to self. Never touch a bio stock before FDA vote, especially when the panel is divided. A few months after that, he made a post asking if he should just sell all of his stocks before things hit the fan, but after that post, it's where things really took a dark turn. This time, r/stocks was tired of his BS, so he posted to the personal finance subreddit instead. This is where he revealed that he not only lost 40K over the past 2 years trading, but that he also took out a 401k loan to average down a stock he was heavily in the red on. Not very many people responded to this post, but the few who did all agreed that he should stop trading and just invest in the S&P 500 or another safe ETF. The story should end here, and it did. For 4 years. When he came back from his 4-year hiatus, he cut the bullcrap and stopped posting on r/stocks. He jumped straight onto WallStreetBets because it was real serious business. He showed us that he was down about 37,000 on Robinhood over the past 3 months alone. But that was only the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. He lost 37K over the past 3 months, of course, 160K last year, and 250,000 over the course of his trading journey. He said, "My third account got done. I have finally lost hope. I will not trade again. Options have killed me. 250K in the hole." Relative Put 4461 said, "You were never trading, you were just donating." This is already bad enough, but in a follow-up post to the personal finance subreddit, he spilled even more beans than he already did. He's actually in debt $20,000 because of these dumb trades. He's in his mid-30s and has a wife and kids. Funnily enough, he makes 150K a year and his wife brings in money too, so they could be living a very comfortable lifestyle if he just invested his savings instead of YOLOing them. He has a master's degree, multiple engineering certifications, and works long hours for a consulting company, but finds it hard to put on a happy face for his wife and kids because of his dim-witted decisions. That being said, he quit trading until he has a down payment for a house, and finally realized why people just invest in safe ETFs. Well, things definitely went pretty terribly, but at least he finally learned his lesson. Is what I would have said if he didn't post this 5 months later. Yeah, after all that commotion, he still lost another $23,000 over the next few months on what I'm assuming were more risky options trades. On the bright side, it looks like he picked up a second job, so hopefully he wisens up. Interaction Fund 5368 is a user who got himself into $4.4 million of debt right before the holiday season. Back on December 20th of 2020, Interaction Fund made a post titled, "I need help. Robinhood says I need to deposit $4.4 million. He was in a concentrated maintenance call, but how did he get himself into such a big woozy? He started this trading spree with 32K. He was selling puts on DWAC for a couple weeks, and this brought him in anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a week. He then shifted on over to selling puts on SPY. This is when he developed a newfound love for iron condors and selling credit spreads. On Tuesday, he got kinda gypped after Robinhood automatically closed this position for a $9,000 loss. This iron condor closed with both sides out of the money, so he missed out on a sweet gain. The next day, he locked in a $25,000 profit. The next day, the S&P fell and his account dropped to less than 25K, so he deposited another 10,000. On Friday, he started rolling his spreads from December 16th to December 23rd. Halfway through doing this, Robinhood swooped in and put a darn restriction on his account for some reason. They forced him to accept the loss of collateral on one of his trades and didn't let him roll it out. After spending hours talking to support, he ended up selling his position and clearing the call. Interaction Fund thought the coast was clear from here on out, but really the party was just getting started. 4 days after this, Interaction Fund got a kind notification letting him know that he needed to deposit $4.4 million into his Robinhood account by the end of the day, or else they would have him dealt with. Interaction Fund was speechless and felt like he was being robbed since he already sold his position. He consulted with financial experts in the Financial Expert Hangout, aka WallStreetBets. I need help! He got the help he needed with replies like, I heard Venezuela has no extradition, and borrow from another bank to cover that, then borrow from another to pay the other bank off. Interaction Fund left the community with a pretty concerning post, and he didn't give us any updates for about a full year. When he finally returned, he showed us that he no longer had an account deficit, but he also no longer had a six-figure portfolio anymore. What he did have, though, was 6 cents. He gave us a detailed update about what's been going on in his life since the $4 million fiasco, and it definitely isn't very good news. He says that he lost his full-time job shortly after losing his life savings on Robinhood. This forced him to move back home across the country to his sister's house while she is currently raising 4 preteens. He worked a new job that he absolutely hated and moved once again, this time with old roommates. After nearly a year of working jobs that he hated, he finally got a decent one again and is able to start financially recovering again. After this stint of reckless trading, you would think he is done trading forever. And he is, kinda. Not really. He says that he's been investing slowly and steadily, but he's only buying shares and selling covered calls on a singular stock. I'll tell you what the stock was in just a second, but in his post, he says that he is banking on the company becoming cash flow positive by 2025. Just look at this chart showing what happened to the stock 6 days into 2025. The stock in question was none other than Fubo. In his old post, he said, I think the company will be successful, but we will see. I am the guy who lost his life savings after all. But Interaction Fund never updated us on how his portfolio looks in 2025. He could either be up quite a bit of money or back living with his family again. Swimming Tourist 5632 is a user who got himself into quite the big pickle. He made his first post back on February 15th to the WallStreetBets subreddit. He said, pretty big gain this week. But unfortunately the post got removed, so we can't see the screenshot of his portfolio. It's all good though, cause he made a new post only 3 weeks after that, and things were actually going mystically well for him. On March 7th, he had about $12.7 thousand in his Robinhood account and was feeling pretty darn bearish. That being said, he YOLO'd everything on 0 DTE SPY puts that were out of the money and only left $36 on the sidelines. Boy oh boy was this a risky move, cause SPY actually went up in price by the day's end. But luckily, Swimming Tourist sold before this. In fact, he sold his contracts only 38 minutes after buying them, more than doubling his portfolio. He was up $14.7 thousand for the day. Swimming Tourist felt like an absolute genius now. So, like everyone else on WallStreetBets, he decided that he was going to push his luck even further and YOLO his whole portfolio on 0 DTE options only 3 days later. Well, it was March 10th, and Swimming Tourist said he woke up late because there's no daylight savings time in Arizona. That being said, the market was already open for about 45 minutes, and it unfortunately opened in the red by almost 2%. Swimming Tourist thought the market was oversold and felt like people were getting too worried about Liberation Day that was going to be happening in a few weeks. He remembered the wise words of Warren Buffett and started dollar cost averaging into calls, getting ready for the inevitable reversal later that day. 30 minutes into holding, he was in the green by about $6,000, but this wasn't quite enough to satisfy his hunger, so he kept on holding. This was a foolish move though, cause SPY resumed its fall shortly after that. Before he knew it, his $33,000 portfolio was only worth $16,000. Even though his contract's value just got sliced in half, he kept on holding. He held until his portfolio eventually hit a value of just $4,000. Down 23K for the day, Swimming Tourist portfolio had officially hit rock bottom. He said, I'm never buying calls again. See you at 200K. So even though he just lost 85% of his portfolio, he doesn't think options are a problem altogether, just calls. And because of that, he once again YOLO'd his whole portfolio on options the following day, this time on puts. But unfortunately for him, SPY started rebounding as soon as he got these puts. With just 2 more trades, he officially lost it all. with the exception of $9.30. He says that part of the reason he lost it all was because it just felt like numbers on a screen. He didn't feel the weight of his wins until he lost it all. He also says he could have upgraded his car and graduated college debt-free. Now it's a whole new grind. Secure Control 2020 was a saint though and gave him some really sound advice. Just get a $25,000 loan again. Can't happen twice in a row. Every ad 5472 is a user who lost his dad's money trading and is about to get the beatdown. Honestly, things were never really going all that great for him, with a post from a year ago titled, "The Way to Become Rich, Loophole," and Elon Musk is in the government? Not really sure if he isn't the greatest speller, or if maybe he was just in a hurry as he was writing that, but it gives us a bit of insight into the level of intelligence we're dealing with here. He posted a few more times about SMCI, MicroStrategy, and Roblox, but eventually posted an actual screenshot of his portfolio on April 8th. It seems like he was very bearish, cause the market opened in the green for the day, but the same can't be said about his portfolio. He didn't say exactly what he was holding, but down 92% for the day, it was definitely some sort of out-of-the-money short-dated puts. It looked like it was over for him, especially considering this was a margin account, but every ad stayed strong and held onto all of his puts. And luckily for him, Trump doubled down on his tariff threats, which sent the market falling once again. By the end of the day, he was no longer down 92%, but actually only 16%, and it briefly spiked in the green too. This was great for the bearish trader, but the next day, Trump actually said, "Yo, those tariffs are canceled now." This bullish news completely destroyed his portfolio, with him now being down $17.5 thousand over the past month. This is already devastating, but it turns out that this money may have been stolen from his dad. "Chris, sell that crap or I'll be coming to the school. You don't want that. In 5 minutes, I'm getting in my truck." "I sold. You lost $17,000 and you activated $5K in margin credit in my name."
Why would your dad care, man?
But it's his money, man. He gave me the money to go to freaking school.
That's the same as stealing. Log out and shut your phone off. OMG! He sold. I'm putting the $3K in his savings account. So yeah, it seems like he definitely is a rebel. He has bigger things to worry about now though, cause 2 months later he posted, "They added ice cubes to my chocolate milk." And about a month after that, it seemed like he moved on from Robinhood to losing money playing poker. Solid Sock 1794 is a user who YOLO'd everything, but instead of YOLOing his own money, he used his mom's IRA. His journey started back in February of 2024. His mom had a pretty solid IRA with $1.4 million in it. Solid Sock, being a financial professional, decided to take it over, and supposedly, she was more than okay with this. I can't even make much fun of him, because he was actually doing a really good job. 5 months into it, he was looking at about $200,000 in gains. And in the first quarter of 2025, he was sitting at just about $3.5 million. Solid Sock 2.5x'd his mom's 7-figure IRA, and he was still dead set on YOLOing it into calls on stocks like Hims, Nvidia, and Google. Come April of 2025, this portfolio unfortunately did not keep growing, but instead fell from 3.5 mil to 800K. Not sure if his mom was informed that her IRA was not only down 2.7 mil from its peak, but also 600K from where it started, but it didn't matter, cause Solid Sock knew he'd be able to make it all back. And he actually did. On July 11th, he posted a screenshot of the IRA that was now worth $5.4 million. And best of all, 85% of it was sitting in cash. Steve is a user who is definitely one of the richest traders on WallStreetBets. I'm not going to spoil how much he has in his portfolio just yet, but his first post on his account is already very spicy. His actual first posts have since been deleted, but the oldest post on his account that we can still access was made on July 10th of 2025. He said, "Minerals guy here, happy to say the thesis panned out." It sure did pan out, because he was up $1.3 million just for the day. Looking at his current positions, he was still a minerals guy and remained very bullish. James Stabs 671 said, "He kept telling y'all, but no one listened." But the thing was that it still wasn't too late to listen to Steve. In fact, even after a 7-figure gain for the day, it was still very early on. No joke, 5 days later, he got another $1.1 million gain for the day, but his portfolio was now worth a grand total of $3.1 million. He had a lot of MP materials calls, and even after this massive gain, he he still said that he pretty much had no intention of selling, even though he could easily retire with this money. And I can't even make this up, literally only a few hours later, he posted another screenshot showing that he was up another 440k for the day. This is one of the rare stories on the subreddit where people just can't hate on him at all because he actually really tried to get people in on the rally. 10 days and one due diligence post later, his $3.6 million portfolio was now worth 5.4. He just threw $1 million into energy fuels calls, so it's safe to say that he wasn't ready to give up just yet, even though he has an absolutely ridiculous looking chart. 3 weeks later, he did not lose it all, but instead made another $3.3 million. With his portfolio worth just under $9 million, most people would wonder why he wouldn't just sell it and, retire. He stayed bullish though, and 3 weeks after that, he hit a very big milestone, breaking past $10 million. If you can make that much in months, take out 8 mil, put it into bonds or something else boring and safe, and just start again with the 2 mil.
Shut up!
15 days later, 19 mil, and 1 week after that, $30 million, plus an additional 1.8 mil in a separate Fidelity account. He's still all in, which is of course very risky, but the same could have been said back when he only had $100,000 in his portfolio, so I guess only time will tell where he ends up. The Master 8899 is a user who was willing to risk it all and YOLO over $500,000 on a fast food chain. His trades weren't always so reckless though, and his first post was made all the way back in January of 2021. Disregarding Robinhood's glitch, his portfolio was sitting just below $200,000. But it must have been pretty rough times for him, cause only 2 days later, he came back to WallStreetBets to show that he cut his portfolio in half, and also had a forsaken account deficit. He titled the post, "Stealing Back from the Hood." But nope, it seems very well like the hood was still stealing from him. 3 days later he said, "Hodl," and was down 23.5k over the past hour. The funny part too is that these posts all got no upvotes or replies, so for the time being, he was just struggling in silence. His next post was not WallStreetBets related, but it still was definitely pretty concerning for other reasons. After that, he stopped posting for a few years, and it seemed like he quit his trading journey for good. Until he finally came back in the summer of 2024. He showed off his $78,000 portfolio that was fairly volatile, but overall unimpressive. After that, he showed off his $15,000 worth of calls on Walmart, $26,000 gain on a QQQ day trade, $35,000 gain on SPY 0 DTEs, $36,000 gain on NVO, $10,000 gain on AMD, and $11,000 gain on more SPY 0 DTEs. He started off the next month by throwing $82,000 into 2 DTE Nvidia puts, but we can see that things quickly started going downhill. He sold before things got too ugly, but his next trade would be one that he'd remember for the rest of his life. "I like the guac," he says, so much so that he was willing to throw 134k into calls. He was up a whopping 3%, and that was all he needed to see before he went all in. 5 days later, he no longer had 134k thrown in calls, but now 600,000. And these calls were no longer in profit anymore, with him down about $46,000. Jello Throw said, "Insider play, y'all, hop on." But unless he wanted to just donate money, 3 weeks later, it would be pretty clear that this was not an insider play. Down almost 100%, he lost over 460k, and the real loss was even bigger than that considering he cut some of his losses before this. Luckily though, while he was losing money on Chipotle, he was still doing pretty good with 0 DTE options trades, with one $11,000 gain and another $26,001 a day later. A month after that though, he let all the Chipotle stuff smooth over and came back with a vengeance. He got a little trigger happy with the buy and sell button on 0 DTE SPY contracts, and honestly, he just made way too many trades throughout the day for me to go over, but by the end of it, he was sitting on a 109% gain for the day and a $312,000 portfolio. And since then, he's posted about his search for a cafe with comfy chairs, but not about his trades on Robinhood, so that's where his story ends. LQH9080 is an Uber driver who is willing to YOLO it all. LQH has made the biggest trades of his life in the middle of October, but he's actually been on WallStreetBets for quite some time, with his first post being made way back in 2019. We also see that he was off to a nice start with a $1,300 loss on his Shopify calls. He took a 2-year-long break from posting to the subreddit, But when he finally came back, it seems like he was doing quite well for himself, with a $3,500 gain for the day, except it was all in on Peloton shares, which we all know now isn't necessarily a booming stock anymore. He also said that this was money he was going to use for a car, and it seems like he had margin turned on, so overall, very risky business. After that, he posted a screenshot of his $1,800 gain on Newegg, his $4,500 gain on Redbox a bit after that, his $10,000 YOLO on AMC, and $4,000 gain on Sega Technologies. So, you know, a very safe portfolio full of companies that are on the up and up. Turns out he was doing pretty well though, cause a few months later, he showed off his Robinhood portfolio that was up $40,000 in the past month. He posted a bit more about AMC and other meme stocks, but then he started asking for suggestions on what casinos to hit up. And a few months later, he said, last $150 to Gambo. The fact he said last $150 is a little concerning, considering he made this post after he started going to casinos, but whatever. It seemed like he completely ditched trading and even add sports betting to his agenda. But finally, on October 3rd of 2025, he made his grand return to WallStreetBets. He's been out the game for quite some time, so he figured he may as well throw his Uber and DoorDash earnings into zero DTE options. He threw $2,800 into out-of-the-money QuantumScape calls, and if the stock didn't make a big move that day, his calls would of course go to zero. But luckily, this was a very bullish day for the stock, with it rising 11%. He sold for 12.3K 3.5 hours later, but also said that he wasn't able to sleep that night because he was thinking about doing something stupid. Suspicious Sir 9509 asked, how long does it take to make 3K in Uber Eats? And LQH responded that it took him almost 2 months to. Well, he knew it was only right to keep feeding the hot hand, so he decided to do another 0 DTE QuantumScape trade only a week later. He threw $9,500 into calls and somehow wound up selling for $19,000 later that day. LQH was on a good run, but he said that he was still DoorDashing overnight to keep his bills paid. Someone also made a comment on this post that really opened my eyes. Apparently, some people have been using the instant deposit feature to purposely overdraft their account to try and make these risky trades without actually having the money. Not really relevant to the story, but definitely some very degen activity. Anyway, 5 days later, LQH was feeling risky as ever and threw $13,000 into 0 DTE SPY puts. The market was up a fair bit in the morning, so his puts took a hit, but by lunchtime, it was down in the red for the day, and his puts were up a monstrous 200%. His portfolio was now worth $71,000, and using his own math, that would take him almost 4 years to make that DoorDashing. So was he gonna lock in his profits and throw that money into something safe like VU or VTI shares? No. 2 days later, he threw $45,000 into more 0 DTE puts. And somehow, he was up another $18,000 with these. It seemed like LQH was on an unstoppable streak, but the market got ready to take some revenge on his portfolio. SPY was in the red that morning, but quickly rose up into the green by noon. His $64,000 position would only be worth $20,000. But joke's on us, he left another comment showing that he sold not too long after he made the post. He even said that he withdrew 30K of his gains, but wanted to keep 40,000 on Robinhood to keep YOLOing on risky options. Y'all might catch me at your front door this weekend. Don't forget to tip your favorite dasher. That was his most recent update, so let's just hope he doesn't end up losing it all. Old Witch is a user who has made and lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on Robinhood. Old Witch started off pretty hot, with his first post being a screenshot of Reddit calls that were up 43K at the time. And craziest of all, he had no intentions on locking in any of his profits just yet. Moist Banana 8449 said, respectfully, how do options even work, and which ones are good? Well, Old Witch wasn't lying and held onto his contracts, coming back 3 months later with an update. He was up 445%, nearly giving him a 6-figure gain. He posted another screenshot of his calls, but got back to us in the summer with some pretty disturbing news. His once $150,000 portfolio was now worth a mere $20,000. Which was actually right back where it started at. Reddit's drop from $225 a share to $90 was rough, and it definitely shows in his portfolio. But through rain and shine, Old Witch stayed loyal to Reddit and kept on loading up on more calls. Reddit's dip was fairly short-lived, and by August 11th, the stock nearly tripled in price from its lowest point that year. Old Witch got back on WallStreetBets and showed us that his portfolio was brought back to life and now worth $210K. $20,000 to 190K, back down to 20K, and straight back up to 210K after Reddit reported solid earnings, a lot of people told him that he should lock in his gains and stop the risky trading. That's a route that most traders on the subreddit never take though, and 1 month later, he started to make even riskier trades. He bought 1 DTE Google calls that were in the money, but not by very much. So if Google happened to have a bad couple days, his $91,000 investment would be completely wiped out. The stock opened in the red that morning, so he felt like a reversal was soon to come. And luckily, the stock rose about 1.7% over the next 6 hours, which was enough for him to realize a $51,000 profit on his calls. The even crazier part is that he says he's been hitting these intraday Google dips. He just didn't really post them all that often. His strategy was buying in the money Google calls when the stock was trading inversely to the general market, which had been working quite well for him so far. Some people hated on his strategy, but according to him, 91K was 24% of his portfolio, meaning his total portfolio was now worth $379,000 instead of $209K. 3 days later, he posted another screenshot of some Google leaps that were up $133K in total. He hasn't given us any updates since then, but looking at the options chain, his calls are worth another $23K if he's still holding. Puzzleheaded Back 96 is a user who was not scared to watch his money burn to the ground. On December 18th, he was feeling very bearish for the day, so he decided to short MicroStrategy with 2x leverage. The market immediately started falling quite a bit at open, but was headed back towards the green about 2 hours in. Luckily though, the market fell below a point of no return and kept on crashing that day, with MicroStrategy in particular falling about 10%. He sold his SMST for a $30,000 gain and was feeling pretty good, but stopped posting his trades for a few months after that. That's until June 27th when he had one of the most volatile trading days I've ever seen. He started off the day with just about 125K in his portfolio and decided to take literally all of it, minus 5K, and throw it into 0DTE SPY puts. Boy oh boy, this turned out to be a terrible move, because SPY rose 0.3% over the next 2.5 hours. This might not sound like that big of a move, but his puts were now at the money, and of course being 0DTE, this meant that he was going to be in for quite a rough ride. His portfolio was down from 125,000 to just 57K, but 2.5 hours later, SPY did a complete 180 and was now down 0.5% for the day. His $57,000 portfolio flew up to a $250,000 where he cashed out. Good thing he did too, cause SPY actually did another 180 over the next hour and a half, which would have left his puts expiring near worthless. Prudent Air 1922 said, "Did you dump 120K into a 0DTE?" And he replied with, "YOLO, I lost 1 million" is a user who we've covered in a prior video, but he just came back to Reddit with a huge update. If you need a refresher on who this guy is, basically, he lost $1 million trading, became homeless at one point, and lost his relationships with his friends and family. But this was all okay because he learned the ins and outs of the market and was ready to make it all back in a safe way. He started off pretty profitable actually, but stopped posting for over a year until he came back on October 14th. Did he make it all back like he said he would? Nope, he actually lost another $250,000. Sigh. Am I just an effing moron? Why can some of you full port 10 times, but I can never win once? Veteran Trailer Trash said, yes, but it's okay because life is short. JRock15 is an unemployed trader who likes throwing it all on the line. His first post about his portfolio was made back on August 20th. He was being secretive about his portfolio value at the time, but he was up $5,900 for the day and $9,100 for the week. Currently unemployed. Needed this W. Let's go. Instead of taking this profit and maybe filling out some job applications, he kept on making risky options trades. He was feeling very bearish about a month later, so he threw 26.5K into 0DTE SPY puts. There's no way to put it nicely though, because he pretty quickly found himself down 43%, and since there wasn't much time left on the clock, it could go straight down to zero if he didn't sell soon. He didn't sell soon, but that actually turned out to be the right move, cause SPY fell right back down, which let him walk away with a $13,500 profit for the day. Resident Tumbleweed said, "Bro, You stupid? Stop buying zero DTE. And Loud Pineapple 4294 said, if you keep playing like that, it's just a matter of time before you lose everything.
Shut up!
J-Rock got back to us a month later, and maybe he should have listened to some of the warnings because he was down 70% for the day thanks to zero DTE spy puts. Thought I was different. Does this mean I need to get a job?
Back, I couldn't wait for it to end. I got no wife, but you got a boyfriend.
Nice to see that he still hasn't gotten a job yet. No Ear 7801 is a user who has made and lost millions of dollars trading options. His first post on WallStreetBets was made in October of 2023. He spent nearly $240,000 on out-of-the-money zero DTE spy calls. He was off to a pretty shiesty start though, down almost 63K. He wasn't worried though. It will go up, he said. Shockingly, SPY did indeed go up. Not by a lot, but enough for him to walk away with a $28,000 profit for the day. Huh, nothing like risking $250K for $25K. That was a pretty steep drop there too, so I'm guessing that he probably was down more than $100K at one point throughout the day. He sold at a pretty good time too, cause SPY ended up falling back down to $420 a share by the end of the day, which meant that he passed on the blessing of these contracts expiring worthless to someone else. He had zero DTE fever now and picked up even more zero DTE spy calls. This time, he threw 87,000 into calls that were just at the money, with his reasoning being, it just can't go down anymore. He pretty quickly lost $8,400, but he wasn't worried since this is exactly what happened with his last trade. As long as he waited it out, SPY was bound to make at least a small recovery. He was so confident that he even averaged down and threw an additional 43K on the line. The day went on and SPY stayed pretty stagnant, which was terrible since it was still out of the money. And that recovery he was looking for never happened, so he lost just about $130,000 that day, assuming he held. He was tired of people talking trash in the comments, so he said, you know what, fine. He's gonna make an even bigger YOLO the next day, but now he was done being a bull. Done with calls. This is going to zero. He threw $168,000 into out-of-the-money zero DTE SPY puts, and this turned out to be a genius move because SPY fell more than 1% that day. If he held, he would have doubled his money, making over $220,000. He actually got temporarily banned from WallStreetBets because people couldn't believe he was really making such big trades, but got unbanned when he came back with proof. He was up almost $700,000 in the past month, and he scrolled through his portfolio showing that his gains lined up perfectly with his post history. He even posted screenshots of his positions, so all things considered, it would be pretty hard to fake. He made a pretty big withdrawal, which is why it shows he's in the negative at the start, and he eventually stopped posting to WallStreetBets, but came back about 9 months later with a new screenshot of his portfolio. It seems like he switched on over to Fidelity and no longer had hundreds of thousands of dollars to trade with anymore. With $70 left in his portfolio, all he said was, "Welp, make sure to like and subscribe to never lose your life savings because doing that will definitely keep you safe." CTT is a user who is completely fine with destroying his portfolio. Disregarding his earlier posts about dumpster diving and Pokemon Go, he made his first post to WallStreetBets on December 19th of 2024. He had just over $25,000 in his Robinhood portfolio, margin turned on, and was feeling insanely bearish. He felt like Tesla was gonna fall quite a bit, so he YOLO'd pretty much his entire portfolio on out-of-the-money 1 DTE puts. He bought these 4 minutes after the market opened, and literally only 4 minutes later, he already doubled his money. He locked in his profits, posted it to Reddit, and even said that this account was funded by transferring his Roth IRA from Vanguard. He made an update only an hour and a half later, showing that he was now up 209% for the day. It seems like he reopened some Tesla puts, and later that day, he came back once again to show that he made his way all the way up to $89,000. He felt like a genius, and wondered if it was because he stumbled upon an excerpt that summarized former British Prime Minister Lloyd George's mistake. Well, wherever he got this intelligence from, it seemed like it wore off pretty quickly, because he came back only 5 days later to show that his 6-figure portfolio crashed all the way back down to $1,500. Jumping ahead to January 30th of 2025, he very well still was trading, and it seemed like he was being just as risky as before. He had $840 worth of Intel calls that were going to expire the next day, and another $3,300 that expired in a week. He made a few more posts over the next few months that got deleted, but it doesn't seem like things were going all that great for him based on the titles. Jumping ahead to October 15th, he got ready to get revenge on the market. He worked his way back up to about $22,000 and he threw everything into out-of-the-money 0DTE calls on the S&P 500. And I kid you not, he was up 301% after just 40 minutes. He was waiting for the market to rise just 1/3% more and he would finally lock in his profits. Except that didn't quite happen and he ended up going back into the red for the day. So we went from $22K to just about $95,000, then back down to $17K, all in what looks like about an hour or so. The best part of it all is that he lets us know he's actually also unemployed. It also seems like no matter what happens, he's never gonna verify his email address. A week later, he got ready to make a trade that was somehow even crazier than the last. It was October 22nd and he had his money invested in the company we all love, Beyond Meat. But it just got halted, so he decided to ditch that trash and pick up some 0DTE SPY options instead. He somehow made a genius move and took his $38,000 portfolio to $86,500. This is pretty much the same peak he got to the week before this, but thankfully he didn't lose it all this time. Welp, only an hour later, he not only went back down to his starting point, but even lower than that to under 19K. This was pretty much a repeat of last week, but hey, at least he has these Nokia calls that also would have expired worthless if he held them. That was his last post to WallStreetBets, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see if he's able to make a recovery. Not Good for Your Health is a user who has never been the greatest options trader. On October 13th, he made his first trade that he was going to share to the subreddit, and so far things were going great. That morning, he bought $8,500 worth of 0DTE calls on the S&P 500, and instead of crashing straight down, he made a $2,000 gain pretty quickly. These calls were still out of the money though, and of course being 0DTE, if the stock didn't have a strong rally throughout the rest of the day, all his money would be zapped away. He got back to us an hour later, and his $10.5 thousand position was now worth just about $400. He said, "Don't be greedy and take your profits when you can." With this being his first post, you would hope that he learned his lesson there and stopped making such risky trades. But a few weeks later, he threw his whole entire portfolio into short-dated, out-of-the-money Robinhood calls. The company was set to report earnings on November 5th, and Not Good for Your Health was confident that they'd knock it out the park. The day of reckoning rolled along, and he was actually right. Robinhood had a record-breaking $20 billion in deposits, revenue of $1.27 billion, and beat earnings per share estimates by nearly 20%. All this good news, but for whatever reason, the stock took a massive dump and fell 11%. His portfolio fell 76% in a day, and he was left with just under $3,000. Like business speaker 610 said, full porting into options is definitely a choice. Wooden Prize 4694 is a user who seems to love losing money on risky options. He made his first post to the subreddit back in March of 2024. But it unfortunately got removed, so we can't see the screenshot. He made another post 3 weeks later though, and things weren't going very well. He threw $14,000 into out-of-the-money CGC calls that expired a week later, and they were already down 48% by the end of the day. Worse than that, the stock needed to jump 49% in a week for him to just break even. He sold for a $12.4 thousand loss instead of waiting till expiration, but according to him, the stock popped right after he sold it. It looks like it broke past $11 per share on that day, so he would have recouped a lot of his losses. Maybe even broke even if he just held a couple days longer. Besides that huge loss, he had just over $11,000 sitting in his portfolio, and he was ready to make his losses back. He made another post 3 days later, but this one got removed as well, so all we're left with is the title. God helps me with this one, guys. He stopped posting for about a month and a half, but when he finally came back, things took a turn for the worst. Down $93.7 thousand all time, he only had $284 left in his portfolio. He said, "Time to quit. Goodbye, WallStreetBets." But a few months later, he posted, "I am back, boys." He made nearly 15K that day with random SPY options. He said, "I clicked 2 buttons and boom." Pleasant Swim 9921 is a user who invests in Legos and in options, but isn't striking it rich with either one. He got ready to make his biggest trade ever and threw his whole portfolio on calls on Nike. This is already very risky business, but the most worrying part was that it was Liberation Day Eve. Most people were pretty worried that tariffs would shake things up in the market, but this wasn't even a thought in this dude's head. He went to sleep that night ready to be rich the following morning. But he didn't get rich the following morning. He instead lost it all, of course, and was down 120k all time. His real losses on the trade are presumably much higher since his portfolio was actually at an all-time high before this. So I'd guess that he really lost like 400k. He said, "I'm never gonna buy options again," and started posting to the Bogglehead subreddit asking for tips on his retirement accounts. Looking back at his portfolio history, we see that he made a post to the Lego investing subreddit asking if a specific Lego set was a good investment, and apparently it was such a trash set that people thought he was trolling. Between this and the Nike calls, you really need to get a real job, man. I Need Stop Cover Call Yol is a user who has been consistently losing money trading options. His first post was made on October 14th, and things were already off to a dangerous start. His Robinhood portfolio was down $78,000 all time, but it was a-okay because he said that he was slowly but surely recovering by full porting into bearish ETFs. I wouldn't really. Days later, he bought into Beyond and sold puts on it, but 3 days after that, he threw a good chunk of his portfolio into Redwire stock. He was down about 1,000 early on, but it's okay because we all know how good of an investment Redwire is. 3 days later, he gave us another update on his portfolio showing that he was down another $900 since his first post, which I guess isn't too bad. But a week after that, he said, "I just can't pick the right stock," and showed he was down $3,700 on it. And 2 days after that, we got another portfolio update, and this time he was down another 14k. He said, "I want to go back in time before I knew this subreddit." But only a day after that, he posted another screenshot of his Redwire and said, "Let's go to the moon." Only 6 hours later though, things got a lot worse, down another $3,800. Skrilly Vanilli is a user who isn't scared to see her portfolio go out in flames. Skrilly's journey started off pretty profitable, with her first major trade being made on September 8th. She bought $11.5 thousand worth of QBTS. These calls were just at the money, but did have about a month till they expired. Skrilly actually picked a big winner, cause the stock jumped 23% in just a week. She quickly sold for a $26,000 profit, which was a 225% gain on her original investment. The only thing is that she missed out on an insane rally over the next few weeks after that. You should never be mad at locking in profits, but if she held, her $11,000 investment would have grown to 172k. Skrilly said that she realizes she shouldn't be too greedy in retrospect, but she was too excited to pass up on that $26,000 profit. Even though she missed out on an additional 134k, she still made an impressive gain, and a couple weeks later, she was ready to make another crazy trade. On October 8th, she was feeling very bullish on Applied Digital and bought $2,200 worth of 2 DTE at the money calls. She wanted to buy even more, but only 14 of the 30 contracts she wanted got filled. She said she was mad the entire order didn't get filled, so she bought way more than she wanted the next day. She loaded up on an additional $6,800 worth of calls and was now in for a total of $9,000. There was only a day left till expiration, but somehow she bought at the most perfect time. The following day, the company had a massive 150 megawatt AI data center expansion, and the stock flew up 16%. Her $9,000 investment grew to $54,000 in 2 days. I applied some amazing timing. She wouldn't be laughing for too long though, cause this is the screenshot she posted a month later. She pretty much lost it all and wondered if she was the only one having a month like this. Greedy is as greedy does, she says, and she was up over $300,000 this year, but apparently just gave it all back to the market. Her biggest losers were on a Dutch Bros earnings play, a United Health earnings play, NVO waiting for a bounce, and CoreWeave. All she has left in her portfolio is about 30k in CNC calls and some Bros calls. General Nation is a user who got ravaged by Beyond. His journey started back on August 28th when he let us know that he just bought his first ever options. He didn't get much, but he picked up about $500 worth of Neo and SoFi calls and had a portfolio worth just under 21k. 2 weeks after that, he asked how screwed he was with a $1,000 loss on Open so far, but that thankfully rebounded a couple days later. A few weeks after that, he posted another screenshot, this time of his $3,200 gain on AMD calls, and at this point, he was getting pretty cocky. Must be doing something right. Only been doing options for a month. Words like that usually come back to haunt people, but for the time being, he was up 129% year to date, and only 5 days after that, He said Energy Fuels is making my day. With a nearly $12,000 gain, the house of cards was still standing pretty strong. Until his next post rolled along. His $37,000 portfolio was now worth under $17,000. He had quite a bit in Energy Fuels calls, Intel calls, and SoFi calls, and none of them were in the green. We can even see a sneak peek of some of his crypto holdings, and that's not looking very promising either. Damn bro, I have Energy Fuels too. We are gonna get bent over. I think we already are bent over. He followed up the next day with a $1,000 profit with SPY calls, but he was gonna need to try a little bit harder than that if he wanted to make his money back. He tried harder alright, but ended up losing even more money, with his next post showing that his portfolio was now only worth $9,800, a 74% drop from its peak at $37K. Down $1,400 on SPY, and with a bunch of other unsavory meme coins, yeah, I'd say he is pretty cooked. But just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, he looked at how terribly his portfolio was doing and figured that the only way to save it was with Beyond. He threw just about $3,300 into 7 DTE calls. These were pretty far in the money, but the thing was Beyond already pumped and dumped. So I guess he was hoping there was going to be a round 2. This never happened though, and he updated us 3 days later to let us know that he was still holding. He'd be looking at a $1,500 loss if he held till expiration, which is probably pretty much all he has left in his portfolio at this point. Cartoonist Civil 4500 is another user who had to say goodbye to his portfolio. His first post on WallStreetBets came quite some time ago, all the way back on June 10th of 2021. His first post was nothing really too special, just a $1,000 loss on Sensonics, which is down 92% since then. He posted a bit more about other dying stocks and about Tiger Coin at the end of 2021. This was a very short-lived pump and dump, and it also looks like he bought during the dump, so definitely didn't make any profit on that. He made a few more posts throughout the years, but didn't make his biggest bet yet until September of 2025. He threw $128K into out-of-the-money open calls that expired 3 weeks later, and later that day, he was already up over $4,600. Visual Flap said, WallStreetBets comments here are bearish, so these will print. 2.5 weeks later though, I definitely don't think they were printing. Down $8,000 for the day and $123K since open, he said that he is miserable. Cherry on top, he sold ONDS calls to buy these open calls, and if he would have just held those original contracts, his portfolio would have been worth about $300K instead of $5,500. Blake the Snake said that he should just roll these out and maybe leave unscathed. Just because he was early doesn't mean he was wrong. But I think part of being right is being on time, so I'm gonna jump the gun and say he was pretty darn wrong here. Sub40IQ is a user whose portfolio is on a lifeline. On June 14th of 2024, he posted a screenshot of his portfolio that was down just over 64% for the day. He had $37 in buying power, and the rest of it was tied up in 3 DTE SPY puts. Someone commented, "Holding over the weekend is dumb." But Sub40IQ responded with, "Why settle for a 70% loss when I can just get the full 100%? When Monday rolled along, SPY did not fall below his strike price or even go in the red for the day. His portfolio was looking like a goner, but he wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. He reloaded $8,000 into his portfolio over the next 2 weeks and was ready to get back to work. He threw $2,300 into 3 DTE AMD calls and $5,400 into 1 DTE SPY calls. He went into profit pretty quickly though, up $7,100 early in the morning. I'm putting this screenshot on my fridge for when I give it all back to the market." 4 days later, he didn't really give it all back, but he was starting to lose it, being down $1,200 on Nvidia. Honestly, the odds could end up in your favor. It's not all lost, bud. All was lost though, all of it, because he posted this screenshot 5 days later. He swapped out his Nvidia calls for Apple, SPY, and QQQ ones instead, and obviously the market was just not green that day. He said, "Stay tuned for the 0 DTE revenge trading tomorrow. We're taking this bad boy to 100%. He didn't post the next day though, and instead took a year-long break. He finally got back to us in May of 2025 and actually had some good news. He threw $12.5K into 0 DTE SPY calls and left a reasonable $33 on the sidelines. An hour into the day, he was down about $3,000, but an hour after that, he was back up at about break even. But an hour after that, he was back in the red by about $3,000. And things were going to get a whole lot worse if SPY didn't have a major rally soon, since these calls were going to expire in just a couple hours. But thankfully, SPY did start to rally, and he was able to sell for a $7,400 gain for the day. He also posted his all-time chart, which was looking pretty darn volatile. Hopefully this peak lasts longer than the one he had a few weeks before this. By the end of May, he somehow made his way all the way up to just under 33K, which is pretty crazy considering his portfolio only had about $1,500 in it a month before this. This is when he really started getting too ahead of himself though. He threw practically every last dollar into Nvidia, SPY, QQQ, AMD, Tesla, and Apple options, and over the course of a few days, his portfolio went from an all-time high to an all-time low. No crying in the casino, he says, but with just under $200 left, Monkey Frog said, maybe cry a little bit. He posted his all-time chart one last time, and honestly, it's quite a sight to see. That was his last post, so I'm not sure if he's still trading options or not. NoPut8503, aka Tweedle, is, according to his bio, a Tennessean who enjoys cowboy boots, 5-panel trucker hats, and speaks with an accent so thick it smells like. But he's also someone who just hit a gargantuan options jackpot. Tweedle didn't truly strike it rich up until the second half of 2024, but he actually started his trading journey well before then. At the start of 2022, he had his eyes on Highcroft Mining. He posted about the company for a while on the stock subreddit, which nowadays looks pretty deserted, but ended up forgetting about the company it seems like. Highcroft Mining may not have gotten the hype he expected it to, but Highcroft Mining. He would soon find the stock that would really change his life. On November 9th, he showed off his currently $3,400 gain with his Archer Aviation calls. This trade looked pretty promising, and he even made sure to buy contracts that expired a couple months out. But at the end of the day, Archer was just a penny stock. It was trading just below $4, and people weren't sure if its hype would continue snowballing or not. And from this day forward, Tweedle started posting about his love for Archer like a bajillion times a day. 7 reasons Archer will soar higher than giraffe. He posted 7 times that day and ended it off with a bang. He was up 17% in a day thanks to Archer, and his portfolio was sitting just under 1.2 mil. The stock was trading at about $4, and he felt like a Santa rally would do him well. 2 days later, he posted to his Country Dumb subreddit, letting everyone know the difference between a lucky idiot and an intelligent investor. He made 3 times his annual salary in one day that week, but wants people to know that you can't just dive headfirst into the market. He's 40 years old and has been doing this since college. He recommends 15 different books and continues his journey. He made a whole lot of other posts, but finally updated us again 2 days later. He was down 92K in a day, but once again, with 15 years of experience under his belt, he knew exactly how to manage his emotions. 5 days later, he was back up to 1.19 mil. 2 more days of posting all day, and his portfolio was getting ready to break all-time highs. He was up 230K in a day, and his portfolio was now over $1.4 million. 1 day later, he was up another 100K and officially raked in a mil just from Archer's squeeze in the past month. 2 days after that, he had another $300,000 profit day and was now at 1.8 mil. With some of his contracts being nearly 30 baggers, this would be a good time to consider walking away. He just made several times his annual salary in a day, but of course by now we know that means nothing to WallStreetBets users. Only hours later, he came back with yet another update. 300,000 in a day? Psh, make it 600. 2.1 mil in his portfolio and still no signs of slowing down. Another 2 days later, and he was just under 2.4 mil now, and said that his giraffe wants a tickle, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. He even got people from his job in on the action. Another 2 days, he showed us that now, some of his contracts were nearly 70 baggers. And only 1 day after that, his portfolio hit a monstrous value of $3 million. Even after making millions of dollars in the past month, he still thinks the stock is a buy. With dozens of posts after this, these are just a few of them. He wants to let us know that we should listen to podcasts or audiobooks to make our morning commute more productive, and how 5 trips to the psychiatric ward made him a multi-millionaire, and brings up an unorthodox way of finding winning stocks. Well, 2 days later, he had bad news. He lost nearly $1 million in a day. But with 2.1 mil, he was still ready to continue holding. No worries though, on December 26th, he was back over 3.1 mil. Just before this, Tweedle also took us back in time and talked about an eye-opening experience in 6th grade. The librarian had an accelerated reader wall, and you would be able to get your picture put on the wall based on how many books you read. This sounds like good fun, but it wasn't, because a girl we'll call Emma spent all class reading Goosebumps books instead of paying attention to the teacher. No one with any respect would realistically be able to beat her score. Unless you had a trick up your sleeve. That's when he started reading a bunch of 1st grade picture books to take the lead and finally got his picture on the accelerated reader wall. Emma was heartbroken, but more important than that, Tweedle relates this to the prejudice that Wall Street professionals have against penny stocks. Tweedle has lots of posts full of wisdom just like this one, and is actually pretty darn open about his investing journey, so if you want to go into more depth, you can check out his Country Dumb subreddit. Convex Dominant 6 is another user who has surprisingly made millions and millions of dollars in this wild month. Back on November 5th, a lot of stocks were bubbling, but the one that caught Convex Dominance's eye was Square. With the stock trading super flat over the past 2.5 years and down 74% since 2021, some people chalk the stock up to be a load of rubbish. But Convex Dominance saw potential and decided to throw $603K into calls. The stock had to jump 20% over the next 2 months, or else you would start to lose money pretty quickly. He didn't need to wait 2 months though, because December 2nd rolled along and Square was trading at almost $93 a share. His $600,000 position was now worth 3.1 mil, but he was not gonna sell until the stock was at least $125. Only 4 days later, he posted yet another crazy trade. He threw just over 200K into SoFi calls that expired 2 weeks later. He was already up 27K, but he never updated us with when he closed. He could have either made or lost 6 figures depending on when he closed since the stock was so volatile. 4 days later, he would get ready to make even more noise on the subreddit. His last gain was impressive, but people wanted to see even more 7-figure gains. And that's exactly what Convex Dominance had in store for us. After eyeing Alphabet, or Google, he picked up some calls on December 10th. And by some, I mean $470,000 worth. This was a big trade, but not much stress would be induced as the stock flew up 5.5% the next day. With another $1.2 million gain in the books, it's safe to say Convex Dominance was on a hot streak. 2 days later, he picked up $360,000 worth of 1DTE out of the money MicroStrategy calls. This trade initially lost him 23K, but I think he says it best with, "Some people call it losing money, but I call it a warm community of like-minded individuals." Edge2110 said, "I mean, if you wanted to throw away 360K, I would have given you my checking account instructions." This money would not be thrown away though, because he sold his calls for a total gain of about $70,000. After posting so much success, a lot of users would start to get jealous. They don't care if something good happened to Convex Dominance. It should have happened to them instead. And only 6 days later, all the haters would finally have something to smile at. It was December 18th, and Convex Dominance was feeling like a bull as usual. He bought $400,000 worth of 2DTE SPY calls and got ready to make even more money. Except, the bears do come out of hibernation every so often, and December 18th just so happened to be a bear's dream come true. SPY dropped nearly 3%, and Convex Dominance lost 330K in a day. He said, fair enough. Sure, he got wrecked, but he wasn't gonna let a bear get the last laugh. He loaded up on even more SPY calls, still out of the money, but this time they expired in 4 days, not 2. He threw 330K on the line, and things fortunately started picking back up again pretty quickly. 1 day later, he was up a total of 361,000, so he recouped his last loss. Convex Dominance was so angered by what the bears did to him though, that he decided it wasn't over until he said it was over. Ready for round 3 the next day, he threw 340K into even more 4DTE SPY calls. This proved to be a fantastic investment because Christmas Eve rolled along and he was up over $500,000. It was Christmas Day, and he would not be able to make any trades since the market was closed, of course. He was ready to spring back into action, and that's what he did only 2 days later. He threw just over $1 million into even more bullish options. In 2 hours, his calls went up 30%, and he pocketed another $300K. He was making so much money that people started calling him a faker, but mods confirmed he was legit and even gave him his own flair. Vital Traders is a TikToker who thought he could get rich trading options. Vital Traders recently graduated from college. He didn't have a 9-to-5, but he did have TikTok. And honestly, he was making good money from it. He said he started earlier that year and already made $100K in a short time frame. It seems like he's selling the truth, and he posted a screenshot to back it up. Anyway, he threw most of his money into Robinhood and instantly started making wild trades. This may sound like it's coming out the blue, but he had experience making risky trades after getting in on Dogecoin's first major rally back in 2021. Vital Trader's portfolio fell by about $35K, which was more than half of what he had, but then quickly shot back up to more than $100,000. He was up about $40K, but this didn't last for long, and the second crash was bigger than the first one. A lot bigger. With only $1 left in his portfolio, things are looking rough. He still has to pay $20 to $25K in taxes on the money he made from TikTok. He has $13K in the bank, which is great, but still not enough to cover his taxes. He's currently looking for jobs and trying to continue the TikTok grind. He hasn't told his parents about this since they think he's doing very well for his age. On the bright side, he doesn't have any major expenses since he still lives with his parents, so hopefully he at least has enough money to cover his taxes when the time comes. Playa4the is a user who just stumbled upon a life-changing trading strategy. Even though he now has his golden goose, his trading strategy used to be whack. He started over 6 years ago and invested his $40,000 in savings into stocks. He bought stocks without knowing what he was doing and ended up losing $17K, which was 42% of his portfolio. He was tired of losing, so we opened up a new account and lost even more money with that one. For over 3 years, he was just bag holding a bunch of losing stocks, just waiting for things to turn around. It was now June of 2024, and Playa4the was headed off to a family vacation. Little did he know, this vacation would change his life forever. His cousin Jay was on the trip with him and told people how he was trading options and specifically selling covered calls. He said he made money whether the stocks went up or down, it didn't matter, and Playa4the was ready to hear more. Over the next few days, he took notes about how much money he made selling covered calls. With this new bulletproof, unheard of strategy of selling covered calls, Playa4the was ready to become a millionaire when he got back home. After doing a bit more research on the topic, he was ready. He spent the next 2 months selling covered calls and actually made some decent money doing it. That's until he realized gains can be way bigger if you just buy calls flat out. He discovered Archer, Rocket Lab, and Lunar and picked up calls on those stocks. In the last 2 weeks of December, he raked in $106K. He says options changed his life for the better, but he's also just a smarter, more disciplined, and careful investor than when he started 6 years ago. Free Doot is an 18-year-old options trader who already feels like he's in too deep to the game. This all started when he got his first major win on DJT back sometime around April. After making this easy money, he was hooked and didn't want to stop buying options. He started by copying the trades of Congress members, but sure enough, this strategy derailed more and more over the next few months. He bought a snowflake call in November just because he felt like it and made money. Since then, he's been buying random options left and right and even lost a little bit of money with crypto. Free Doot was getting a little too wild, and honestly, he needed someone to stop him. And in December, he would be hit with a big wake-up call. He bought 6 out-of-the-money Planet Lab calls and 2 ARGT calls. Well, his Planet Lab calls lost him over $1,200 so far, and his ARGT calls got exercised. But by the looks of it, Free Doot didn't know what the heck it meant to have your options exercised. All he saw was a negative $16,000 account balance. He says he's so cooked and his life just started. Eventually though, he does find out that all he has to do is sell his shares to recover his losses. A user with a suspicious looking name is someone who is willing to risk it all for SPY. He started the month with $26K and magically made it all the way up to $120,000 in just a couple days. He was trading SPY options and things were great. But then, his portfolio dropped by about $60K. No worries though, he went right back up to $125K just a few days later. Up almost 400% in a week, he was on top of the world. Surely there was no way he would lose 99% of his money in the next 2 days after Christmas. With only $1,500 left, it looks like his journey is over. And he leaves us with, SPY is a manipulated piece of shit. 3 hours later, that fish Cray also made a post with the same title, except it seems like he was on the winning end of the trades. He was up 60% over the past 2 weeks and said, "Seems like the other guy just passed it to me." NASA Rocket 20 is a full-time 19-year-old day trader who has been doing pretty well for himself so far. NASA Rocket had already been trading for more than 4 years in different accounts, but those were all with small amounts of money. Flash forward to 2024, he wanted to take it up a notch and get rich in his Roth IRA. Back in August, he threw $20K into gold. The stock went from $220 to $240, so he cashed out with an $1,800 gain. A gain like this isn't too shabby for a 19-year-old, but it simply wasn't cutting it for him. He wanted to go for big money, so he started to look for stocks that could potentially 2x. He started paying attention to AI and quantum computing stocks since it seemed like they could make huge gains even after an initial spike. This is when he went on a trading spree. He bought Rocket Lab at $13 and sold it at $24, bought AMPG at $2.36 and sold it at $3.15, made $20K in one morning with BAOS, then bought back $70,000 worth of AMPG. This brought his portfolio to $94K, but he didn't plan on selling his Amplitech shares until they're worth about $15 a piece. A lot of users would comment that he should take his money and run, and that he's gonna regret not selling, but NASA Rocket didn't listen and held on to his shares. After his post, it seemed like he was right, because Amplitech rose almost 30%. He came back with an updated screenshot of his portfolio, and it was now $124,000. He says he appreciates all the comments and that he loves to prove the haters wrong. He also lets us know his master plan. He was 12% of the way to taking his portfolio to $1 million. He was gonna let his Amplitech shares grow to at least $200,000 of total value and sell it all. Then, he would put 80 to 90% of his money into a safe index fund and use the leftover 20K to make anywhere from 2 to 5K a day. You might be saying, whoa, slow your horses. How do you expect to make 20% a day? Well, don't worry about it, because over the past 4 years, he's developed a winning day trading strategy that has an 80 to 85% win rate. After making his way to 500K, he would YOLO it all on one trade to 2x his money to finally have $1 million before 20. You know what? This sounds like a great idea. He followed up with more pictures of his portfolio on December 27th, but at this point, everyone is just hating on him. So I guess we'll have to wait and see where he ends up. Shady Patel is a user who's willing to take out loans for what he thinks is an opportunity too good to pass up. On December 3rd, Shady Patel logged onto his American Express account and took out a whopping $20,000. He wasn't using this to pay his bills or anything. No, he was using it for a much more important investment. Planet Labs had doubled in price over the past month, and he didn't want to miss out on a once-in-a-lifetime gain. He booted up his portfolio and threw everything on the line, with 10.9K on shares and 9.3K on calls. As far as the shares go, he was a little bit safer, but the stock needed to jump quickly or else his calls would be dropping hard every day. As of December 29th, the stock has only rose 3 cents, while his calls have fallen 80%, which would put him at a total unrealized loss of $7,300. He hasn't given us an update post just yet, but he says that he's holding until it hit $8. Yeah. Let's just hope he's able to pay back his loan. No Comfortable 5313 is a user who celebrated a bit too early. He bought 26 VUG calls for only 5 each. They were so cheap since the calls were 10% out of the money with only 2 weeks till expiration. This didn't matter to him though, because with a little bit of magic, anything was possible. His calls rocketed 660% and he said, "Ha, suckers." He wrote to the subreddit, "Shout out to whoever sold 26 of these for 5 cents a pop." This wise investor did not realize that there was zero open interest on his calls. He in fact did not make $600. What he did have though was an account deficit.